All right, it's Thursday, February 15th, 2024. I'm Steven Sersky. This here is episode number 44, and today I have a returning guest, Denny Goin, who was last on the podcast a couple of years ago at this time. Since then, he's been moving around the world quite a bit. We've kept in touch and had a few conversations since our last podcast recording. However, we thought it would be a good time to do another recording, do another interview, and see what he's been up to, cover some of the things that he's seen and done over the last few years, both during the COVID times and after the pandemic ended. He is currently still in Georgia, but he is looking to move once again and planning out the future and what he will be able to do either in Georgia or somewhere else. The conversation does run a little bit long, but I think everyone will get something from it, as Denny is one of those guys who has an opinion about quite a few things and will share it with you if you give him the time. I let him go, and I do try to steer the conversation a little bit so that we can keep things moving. But I think it is interesting to hear this take from Denny, someone who has lived, worked, and traveled extensively throughout the world. So with that, let's get to episode number 44 with Denny Goin. 2, 1. Everything you say and do can and will be used you on social media.
I'm terrified.
Aren't you? I mean, isn't that the new way? I mean, forget about the law, forget about due process. I mean, it's social media that's the big drag. Speaking of which, happy Year of the Dragon.
Likewise, Steve. How's it going for you so far?
It's going all right. I was deciding which shirt to wear today. I went with the less crinkly and more accessible red shirt. So is this, in your view, was this communist red or is this socialist pink?
This looks more commie red to me.
Commie red. Okay, so I guess I kind of fit in where I belong at the moment, I guess. So finally,
without a doubt,
from across rivers and oceans and lands far away, he returns third time. Denny Goin.
Yes.
And I was thinking, actually, because we scheduled this just recently. You're back in Georgia. Was the last time we talked, you were back in Georgia for the podcast? I know the last time we were actually talking, it was were you in Georgia or were you somewhere else at that point?
So the last time we did a podcast, I had been in Georgia only 1 week. This goes back to May of 2021. It's been just short of 3 years.
What? It's been 3 years since we talked, like a recorded conversation that we're okay with other people actually listening in on.
The first time was when I was still in Nevada, back in America in October 2020. I was about to bounce to Korea. And then I checked today. The video was me being in Tbilisi here just 1 week.
Wow.
And actually, for most of that time since then, I haven't been in Georgia.
This is actually
that time.
And I was thinking, because we did the States, if we did Georgia, we should just wait a week when you're going to be in Egypt, and then we could have had a trifecta. I mean, that would have been kind of cool, but like true global traveler podcast style. But you're going to Egypt for a different reason, and you wouldn't want to be busy with a podcast.
No. The time in Egypt is just for about a week because I only have one job right now. I'm going to go back to having two, and then it'd be impossible to do anything with my fiance.
Right. Fiance, soon to be wife, or can we venture into this territory, or would you rather leave that to the...
No.
So congratulations
then.
Fine. I guess when's the big day?
It hasn't been set yet. However, a wedding ring has been purchased. It has been purchased. Yes, of course, gold, and there's a diamond.
Pure gold, or is it like tarnished 18-karat gold?
It is not pure gold, of course. Not that'd be too soft. But another problem is that my fiance, she is, while she isn't petite in the sense that she's very short, she is markedly thin, and so her ring size is actually a women's 12. And here in Georgia, apparently that's really tiny. The smallest sizes they typically produce here in Georgia, and Georgian women aren't known for being particularly big. It's 16, to give you an idea.
Okay.
And so while it's been bought here, I'll have to be resized when I get to Egypt.
So how did you
Mhm.
meet your fiance? Because I mean, you've been traveling all over the place. Who agreed to talk to you this much?
So, a very fair question, I guess. There are a variety of websites for trying to meet people online.
Hmm.
And given how I am socially, but also because of my interests and how I wish to live, and the fact I don't really socialize, I don't go to bars, I don't go to cafes or other things like this. It, in some ways, it's a screening process. It saves everybody a lot of time. And so you put up your profile and information, and there are many different websites that do this.
You're
And
talking like
so
Tinder
Russia,
or Plenty
no,
of
good heavens,
Fish?
no. No, no, no,
Okay.
no, no. I mean, no, Tinder is for hookup one night stands, things of this nature. And I mean, I guess you could use this website that way, but that's certainly not how it functions, generally speaking.
Right.
And so
Okay.
anyway, I use it sort of as a screening process because I was very thorough. I probably took like 2 hours answering everything or almost everything in the profile. And then also I read the profiles quite a lot. And so apparently a lot of men will, swipe right, I guess, showing approval for just about any woman that they see or something like this. I am very thorough when I'm looking at profiles. And if they show that they're more cosmopolitan in the sense that that's what they kind of living that they like, then I don't even waste my time messaging them or anything like that. And then for the
Yeah,
women
you
who I get messages
certainly
from,
don't read profiles on Tinder. I mean, some people do, but it really is a numbers game. Tinder. I know it isn't just a lot of people say that. You spend all the time craft a good profile, and what you swipe right or match with probably will not be what you're going to get anyway.
yeah. And then also
So
for
then,
women, uh-huh.
right, for women, what are you going to say?
With my profile, I'm quite clear about my desire to live off grid. Now, maybe I don't go as so thoroughly into my other worries or thoughts about the world in general, but they certainly have an understanding of where I'm coming from.
Right,
And that
because
seems
your
to be
other
somewhat
thoughts would
effective.
attract them more, or would repel them more? Like how would that go? Because Denny, you have some thoughts that are not well, they're kind of out there.
To be certain. And it lets the woman understand who I am. I'm quite honest about it. I don't sugarcoat it. And
I would
it
agree.
works fairly well.
You're very straightforward in that regard.
And I started using this website the summer of 2022. And from the website, I have made a couple of friends. There was one woman I met who I thought there might be an opportunity for a relationship with. And so I went to Kenya, as you know, a
Right.
year ago. And I was in Kenya for 5 months. It didn't work out between us, but as you know, when I was considering coming to Georgia, I also was thinking about going to Kenya. And so
Yes, I remember.
I was quite good going there.
So you're traveling. I don't want to use the colloquial term for what it, but you're traveling for women, basically. You're traveling to get around.
Well, not precisely. I mean, as you know, my first concerns were making sure that the country was, generally speaking, from what I could gather, viable in terms of self-supportive in food, water, other things like this, and that Kenya was the first place where I've been where people spoke English,
Well,
by and
does anyone
large. And
speak
that,
in Georgia? Is anyone? Is there a decent like? Can you get around speaking English there? Because
oh,
my
certainly.
you don't speak Georgian or the other language that occupies the lens.
No. There are enough people that have some understanding of English, and certainly, like when I went to the jeweler today, I got the ring this morning. Uh, they they have A2, B1 level of English, and it's sufficient.
Yeah.
It's sufficient. And then when you go like to to get your SIM card or other things like that, Mogti, they they always have 2 or 3 people who are fairly proficient in English. And at the Bank of Georgia, that's not an issue.
Yeah. So you're saying that A1, B2 is sufficient to make money. So then why learn anymore?
A2, B1.
A2, B1. Yeah. That's all you need to make money, make cash, make dough, buy gold, and get rich.
If you're in Dubai, yes.
Sounds like in Georgia as well. Not too difficult there. So then if you're going to Egypt, you're going to be there for a week. Where are you going after Egypt? I mean, are you getting married next week, or is that still to be determined?
No, we're not going to. It's not likely that we're going to be wed in Egypt. It's a little complicated, not overly complicated to be certain. But for example, like in China, when a foreigner marries a Chinese national, all you do is you go to your provincial offices, you take photos of you individually and then photos of you together. You go in. It's real. Okay, this is what happened to me anyway in 2009. All right.
I don't think it's changed. Judging by WeChat moments that I've seen of people, I don't think it's changed at all. But explain the process, because I mean, I'm sure people would be interested.
So this was in Hubei. Okay, so I want to mention that also. It was in Hubei province. So maybe provinces do it differently. I bring my American passport. She has her Chinese hukou. I got a document from the American embassy that I was free to marry. And I don't know, we didn't know to bring the pictures. And there was an office literally right next door.
Of course.
Okay, and it cost like 20 renminbi to have all the pictures taken. We go back in, it's another 20 or 30 renminbi to get everything stamped and this and that. And that was it.
How long did it take?
20 minutes. And
So
I mean, half that time was going to the other office.
And 20 minutes, and you're married in China. I mean, what can you do in the States for, $5, $10, and 20 minutes? You can't even get a decent anything these days for that.
Yes, right? These days, no. Nope.
So then Egypt, you're going to be there only for a week, not going to arrange things. So where are you deciding? Like, are you going to have a destination wedding? Is that what's on the books, on the docket?
Very unlikely. Very unlikely. She is a widower, and she's got a couple of kids. She's a professional engineer, construction engineer.
Oh, wow.
And so her family, so she's ethnically Spanish and Egyptian, mainly Egyptian, and most of her family lives in Spain.
Okay.
In fact, it's only her mother-in-law, who is still getting up there in age, is the only one still in Egypt.
And so she speaks English fluently, I guess. Is she speaking Arabic, Egyptian Arabic, and Spanish?
So some Spanish. She grew up in Egypt, to be certain. Mm-hmm. As for her English ability, so she also studied French, and so sometimes that creeps in a little. Not the Spanish. Her vocabulary is probably like a B2 level. And her communicative ability is generally B1, B2, and that's also her understanding. So I grade my vocabulary a little bit, but not very much at all.
You're an international man. I mean, have you ever had an American wife or girlfriend? And by American, I mean like born, raised, and speaks American.
Speaks American. That's right. We don't speak English. We speak American. Good. I'm glad. Well, you're Canadian. You should understand that. I have only ever dated an American woman, and that was many, many years ago. And it was because I left the States that there was never an opportunity for it to go beyond that.
So then when did your ANCAP was it ANCAP thinking creep in? Was that about the time that you left the United States? By ANCAP, I mean, is it anti-capitalist? Is that what it is?
Anarcho-capitalist.
Anarcho-capitalist.
Yeah, not anti. Yeah, I am the guy. Well, no, I'm not quite the guy who says that you should be able to sell heroin to kids. No, I don't believe that. Okay. No.
But drugs, like pharmaceuticals, would be okay. So there's a sort of play on words here. Heroin, drugs, I mean, potato.
Well, all right. So in a typical ANCAP position would be that you have right to your own body. And whatever drugs you wish to take, whatever you want to put into your body, you are free to, assuming a couple of things. All right, it's caveated that you understand the implications of what it is. Okay. And generally speaking, right, and this is where you get argument within libertarian or ANCAP spheres is, at what age is someone cognitively responsible enough to manage themselves before then their parents or a legal guardian or what have you. Mm-hmm. And then the other issue, of course, is that the purity of whatever you are receiving, that it is clear that whatever you are getting is exactly as advertised. All right. A lot of people usually think that ANCAPs, for example, you could be putting in eating poison or other things like that. No. Because again, it goes back to the NAP, the non-aggression principle. An action can only be ethical or moral if and only if all people who are involved in that action are willing, cognizant participants. So
but if some ANCAP wants to be drinking rat poison, does that mean that they can do it if they are of sufficient level of cognition and at other standards?
Now, so would it be ethical for you to sell it to that person then? That is for your own choice to make. But if the person right, because you're not going to know, okay? Usually when someone goes to buy rat poison, they're going to say, Steve, I need to buy some rat poison for you because you own a supermarket or something like this. And then I'm going to eat it.
Okay.
People don't usually function that way.
Right. All right. So someone has this sort of ability. Now, I'm guessing you don't claim this, but you do claim sort of part of this as your belief system that sort of made you, and I can't remember if we had talked about this years ago. I know we touched a little bit on the politics and everything, and what sort of helped drive you out of the States so many years ago. And that was like close to 25 years ago already. That it was the political situation. Was it ever the consideration of the opportunities?
Well, what got me out of America the first time was work. I graduated from university a year early, and in 2004, there was a slight economic depression in America, not very large. But I was having difficulty,
but enough to make a material difference. It's like, well, I could stay here and make a go of it, or I could get rich in China.
So I remember at that time I wanted to be a classicist. Okay, that's right. I thought I was going to be in the academy, but basically, what it came down to was that there was no value to me staying in the United States at that point. That basically I'd forfeited a year because I'd have to wait a full year before I could start working in public schools, hopefully teaching history. And then to establish residency so I could pay in-state tuition, because at UCLA, there's a big difference between paying $2,000 a semester or $10,000 or $15,000 a semester for graduate study, which is what it was back in the middle of the 2000s.
Do you know what it is today?
Now God knows what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't dare to fathom a guess. So that's how I got to China. But then I was already fairly Spartan in my lifestyle and not very caring about decorations or other things and how little I really needed. And then in China, there was really a wake-up call.
Spartan, studied classics, wanted to be a classicist, Spartan life, not stoicism.
So stoicism is just how you treat life. It doesn't mean you might not have paintings in the background, right? That's how you know I did not choose this place. It's a nice painting, by the way. I really like that painting there. Over the last 3 years, I've been here on and off.
Right. So, yeah, I'm not sure how much tuition is even in Canada these days. I know it was about 5,000 per semester per term when I was going to university 10, 15 years ago, but I haven't checked.
Yeah.
Uh, is that a possible reason why, like, why don't more people come to China to study? Because it's cheap here. I know there's the language barrier, obviously, but there are degrees done in English as well, I believe, in China. Like the big universities all have it, and it's still cheaper than in the States or in Canada or all of Europe.
Well, I mean, so remember, you're still living there, man. I could speculate as to why people might be a little reluctant to go there. Is that okay?
Sure. Your opinion.
Okay. Okay. So my guess is certainly some of it is fear mongering. I mean, for example, the whole social credit score thing, and there are literally video cameras everywhere, and this and that.
And there's more. They put in more since the pandemic ended.
Okay, all right, that may be so, but you know as well as I do that a third to half those cameras aren't functional. Okay, right.
If they're plugged in, I'd be surprised. And if someone could, the whole thing about AI facial recognition is because there are so many people all over the place all the time. You just need, like, Beijing is a city of the country, is just less than the population of Canada, basically.
Yeah.
And it's like, imagine policing Canada without a camera system in place. It's not going to happen. I mean, ANCAPs might like that, but the people, the liberal left-leaning, the let the roses grow people, I mean, they're not going to enjoy having that much sort of available criminality going on, opportunities for crime, because that's all that happens when you don't have cameras around and stuff like that. I don't know. But Beijing, I mean, yeah, there's more cameras here than there were before the pandemic even started. So security is one issue. I was actually talking to another guy from the compound just this week, and we were kind of wondering if anybody would come over to Canada, to China to visit at this time. And it's not like China's really on the talking block of visitations.
And again, there's just so much fear mongering, especially vis-a-vis that renegade province.
Which one? Oh, right.
Oh, the renegade province.
Which is worse, me saying which one and not knowing, or right?
Yeah,
that could cut it out.
I promise.
Well, I guess, yeah, there is. But I mean, and that one, I remember when I was in South Korea, and people were wondering why I would go to a place that was so close to North Korea, because you could die from the bombs, from the nuclear fallout, or whatever. It was like, pick your catastrophe about like dictatorship countries, and that was that. Now, I mean, I would love to go back to South Korea. I think South Korea is a wonderful place. Although I'm told from many Koreans I've met that it's not so, people aren't as happy as they seem to be because of like whatever the production is. There's a lot more social pressure going on. But South Korea had a story like, why would you go there? China, why would you go there? I mean, no one ever really questioned why I would go to Ukraine. And then when I was in Ukraine, I was like, why am I here? This is, I should leave. And look at what happened there.
Yeah, unfortunately, used as a pawn by the Western governments. And
do we want to get into this? Boy, we had such a congenial conversation about marriage and heroin addicts, and then we want to get into the Ukrainian war.
You want a crazy ride, my dear friend. We haven't really touched off on the Suez Canal. What's going on there with the Houthis in Yemen, and of course the Israelis and Palestinians in the Gaza.
And you're closer to all of that than me. I mean, I'm far away from it.
Yeah.
Did you watch the Putin interview with Tucker Carlson?
Of course.
Did you watch the whole thing?
Yes. Oh, okay. Yes, I did.
So you didn't like liberal left media just, I'm so disgusted by this. Carlson's a stooge. And then like read the headline and that's it.
And
I should stop saying that. I shouldn't just point at the liberal left. I mean, because it's just that the whole pandemic media debacle, for people who believe the Western media and yet start throwing jibes at Carlson for getting this type of interview, it confuses me why they would that. It was interesting what Putin said about the propaganda machine that the U.S. has, and he just laughed. He's like, "There's no facing that. I mean, it's like facing off against the nuclear bombs that were dropped against Japan. It's like U.S. is number one in propaganda."
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think that's true?
So, of course. Operation Mockingbird. Look it up. Okay.
Which one's this? Mockingbird. I know of MK Ultra.
Unless I'm remembering, Mockingbird is CIA intentionally infiltrating the New York Times, the Washington Post, and other media outlets.
Okay, sure. MK Ultra was the mind experiment where they only had to get 67% of the people to believe something, and then it became commonly accepted. And I think those two things are sort of at play with the media. I don't know. You tell me what. Because you've been out of the States, you read a lot of the news, you read a lot of the media, but you travel to a lot of off the mainstream destinations, off the path. Yeah. What do you see going on?
So, again, you can probably go back to what I said 3 years ago, or a little bit more than 3 years ago. As I said, the BRICS countries and others are looking for alternatives to NATO, especially with the confrontation between Ukraine and Russia getting hot, and the American government deciding to not only freeze, but seize Russian government assets. And BRICS, right? January 1st, you've got Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the UAE, Iran, Ethiopia, right? And Ethiopia is a really strange country because it's landlocked, among other things. And they have 3 different minority groups who are in a tussle frequently for control of the government. Argentina was supposed to also be in there. But our dear savior from the Lord, Javier Milei, a self-identified anarcho-capitalist, was elected president of Argentina by 55%. They tried to screw him over, the left and the right down there. By the left and the right, I mean the powers that be.
All right.
And he still got a majority. All right. They really tried to get him on something, and it didn't succeed. And
with all of this knowledge that you got about how this political sort of back and forths that happen in these countries, what have you seen over the last 3 years, given all your travels to places like Georgia, Egypt, United States, South Korea, Kenya? I mean, are you seeing real world examples of this type of fallout, this political fallout on the ground, or is it just all media newspaper hyperbole?
So, for example, when I was in Kenya, I would read the papers a few times a week, and they would refer to Sustainable Development Goals, UN plans about how the world ought to be, right? You got these geniuses, whether they be in DC, London, Brussels, whatever, who have grand visions about fixing all the world's problems and how this is pushed, especially on developing countries, to meet these goals so that they can continue to get money from the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank. Now, we don't deal with it as much in Western countries because while our governments, for example, like California says you can't have cars that are not electrical vehicles in 2030, okay? Starting 2030, all new cars sold there must be. So you get into the legislation. Yes,
or where?
Not throughout the whole United States. In California, as an example. I don't know about other countries or districts. So, But in Kenya, people are having to think about this and saying, are you serious? Our economy isn't going to function. We can't do this, okay? And so that's why you're seeing, for example, this backlash. It's just unrealistic. A lot of these nice sounding goals and ideas And the sacrifices are going to be made. All right. We already see high prices that aren't coming down in the Western countries because they printed so much money during the coronavirus. Higher taxes, not in all countries, obviously, but even now, Saudi Arabia has just this year started an income tax.
All right, so we're getting a little bit off track here because you didn't go to Saudi Arabia. You've worked there before, and you also went to Dubai at some point, I believe.
Yes.
Now, what would be? So you're talking about taxes and this printing money and this political blah 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 that's going on. What is a food item that you have seen or maybe consumed from here and there all over that has maybe changed the most in price?
Well, actually, no, this is something I've noticed that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Eggs. All right. Eggs is a very common, basic way of people getting protein. What I've noticed is that the cost of eggs here in Georgia and the cost of eggs in Kenya, the cost of eggs in Egypt, when I was in Korea, it's all roughly about how much you would pay in the United States in terms of dollars. And so, comparatively speaking, it's a lot more expensive in Kenya. It's a lot more expensive in Egypt. It's more expensive in Georgia, right? If you're looking at from the average person's point of view, living on the average income for that country. Now, that doesn't make a lot of sense because there should be differences in the number of chickens. There should be differences in the number of eggs. And eggs isn't something that really crosses borders all that much. Okay.
Why would there be differences in numbers?
In the price? Why would there be a difference?
Well, you said because they're going to differences in numbers of chickens and eggs. I mean, why?
Of course, there would be a difference in the number. So the number of chickens that there are per person in Georgia are going to be different than the number of chickens per person in America or Kenya, right? That's just a given. There should be some variation at least. But from what I've noticed, it's like buying gold. All right, it's a gold or Bitcoin or whatever, right? It's whatever country
golden
you're
egg.
In, it's the same. Golden eggs. Yes, if I had such a chicken, that would be very beautiful. So eggs, right. I've noticed. Now, drinking milk, I guess, is more of a Western thing, certainly. And then also it's really an American and perhaps American and Canadian kind of thing. Because milk here is about double the price as it is in America. Yeah, it is. And so, right, double the price for America. So that's like quadruple, quintuple, septuple, how much it would cost, right, if you're going from the basic income. And so I don't get it. And these are things that...
And China's very cheap. Milk is cheaper. They subsidize that quite a bit. So likewise with water. What about the price of water? Georgia, Kenya, states?
So here in Georgia, for example, there are springs everywhere. Okay, I mean, right, there's a spring maybe 100 yards from where I live. Little natural water, and the local dogs drink from it, or can. It's high up enough so that the dogs don't drink it. There's a little pool, if you will, underneath for them to drink from. In Kenya, water was also quite cheap, but from what I get out of it, it is subsidized. To what extent, I'm not sure. Georgia, there's no need. In Kenya, my guess is realistically 40-50%.
How much did the water cost? All the water.
Geez. So 2 liters for $50, something like that. I mean, it's been a year, but it was really, really cheap.
That's 2 liters. So in China, actually, speaking of inflation, 1150 renminbi for 4 liters of Nongfu water. And so Nongfu is like your standard issue Chinese water. And that has gone up. It used to be 10 renminbi for the 4 liter jug. And then like it would go up in increments, like very specific increments, I remember, but that's gone up by 1 kwai 50. Now, for a lot of people, that might not sound like a lot because that's what, 20 cents American, US. The problem is that I know for a fact that the wages have not increased proportionally. And this, not only that, with they're talking about employment issues here in China, like outside sources are talking about employment issues in China. And from what I can tell, how people are talking about their job, their responsibilities, and whether or not they would change jobs. First of all, no one is looking for, well, everyone's looking for a different job, but no one's willing to really take the jump just yet because there's so little to find. Next, in terms of how much money they make, they're making about the same that they were before the grand pandemic, but they are being asked to do more for a longer period of time. And apparently, I don't know if you saw the news. I don't know how much you keep track of what goes on through WeChat news, but there's it's not shadow overtime. It's invisible overtime, where your employer asks you to do something after your work hours through social media. So they'll send you a message. Oh, hey, can you just send me an email? Can you just scan this document? Can you do this? And it's already your time off. So if you were still at the office, you'd get paid overtime. But since it's WeChat, it's just a text message. They've sort of been pushing that to the limits of how far it can go. And as a result, people are sort of pushing back at that right now, that they are starting to say, we don't want to work all the time. we just want to play our video games alone and watch our Goen alone, not to be pestered by our boss. And I know this happens. I've seen people that are always talking with their managers. It's good if you need something done, but if you work for one of these companies, I mean, you're always on. Have you seen that happen anywhere else? This sort of push to work.
So I'm of a couple of different minds about this. Are you familiar with Peto's law?
Peto's parental, 80%, 20% sort of thing?
Yeah, exactly. And so realistically speaking, right, 20% of your workforce will produce 80% of your goods or services. Okay? And
so are you saying that 80% of the workforce is useless?
I'm saying 80% produces only 20%. All right.
Okay.
And then of that, okay, but this stacks on top of one another. Okay. So of that 20%, 20% make up 80% of that 80%. All right. And you see this. Okay. You see this happen. That's why people wind up getting promotions and becoming managers and the CEOs and so on. All right. It's fairly hierarchical, but it's based on the fact that they produce. All right. That's typically how it's done. And so people staying longer, well, there's a lot more distractions and other things going on. I mean, I am a capitalist, and I've worked in government systems. I've worked for private companies. I've run my own school. And I see this play out. I mean, just as a quick example, I was working at a summer language camp once, and I was assigned to put up these posters on different floors of this dormitory building where the students were going to be housed for that summer. And I had one wing of this building, and I was put with 5 other young women to handle these 2 wings of a building, right? And so I did my 10 floors, and then I was finished. The 5 ladies working together to put up the same, right, 5 together doing the same number of flyers as me as one man. They had completed 3 in the time it took me to do 10. And then later, when we were talking about it, they asked, well, Denny, how did you do so quickly? And unfortunately, I didn't have a filter. And I said, well, I didn't do it as a committee. Oh, boy. That. And so most workers, and especially this younger generation in the West, is remarkably entitled. Okay, I agree. You shouldn't have to be doing, you shouldn't be doing things like that. Your boss should not be expecting it. However, if you're showing initiative, which most people in this generation, and even in our generation, don't understand and don't do, yeah, okay, what do you expect?
You know, and this is, it's so, I hear what you're saying, spoken like a true old man, I'm not going to lie, because I've heard this from a lot of the people who are, who've run the gauntlet of intro jobs, basically. And I can't help but notice this, that a lot of people who are criticizing the younger generation as being entitled or not willing to work, they are also exposed to a lot more opportunities that we never had. And I'm looking like even this podcast here, in terms of had we tried to do this 20 years ago, it would have been horribly difficult. Not impossible, but horribly difficult. Now, I mean, I'm looking at the devices that I have around me, and this is what young people are growing up with. I mean, you got your phone with your message system, you got your lights that you've all purchased for like pennies on the dollar, you've got high-speed Wi-Fi, broadband and everything. There's so much more going on, and I know that there are some people, some business people who are saying it's not so much that the young people are lazy, it's that they have so much more to deal with at one time than we did when we were 20 and just graduating or getting into the workforce. What do you think?
So there are a couple of things that are still happening in modern education that's been true for 40, 50 years and has really poisoned the well. The first one is the blank slate theory. Okay, honestly speaking, as much as it sounds good that we can reform and change ourselves, sorry. Your mentality, your likelihood to commit crime, a whole bunch of things are probably 70 to 80% genetic. And so that's good news somewhat for people.
Okay.
It is. Okay, that it is. All right, blank slate theory is out. But also this idea that people are actually really capable of something called multitasking. No, this is the great delusion.
Right? I've heard this criticism before. I guess multitasking, or can you automate and can you set up more things quicker in sequence that, and I look at this because I've tried to do a lot of automation on my own side for podcasting and stuff to make my own life easier, just in terms of broadcasting to all the social media networks. I mean, there are tools that can help you with that. Not only that, it's like coming up with ideas for shows. You ask ChatGPT. You don't have to Google and filter through all the forms and stuff like that. So it's a lot easier in terms of multitasking. You're right. Multitasking is difficult to do 3 or 4 things at once, but you can do each thing quicker, better, and far faster than to better, higher quality, I guess, as well than we could before. And then that way you can move on to the next thing. That's what I'm seeing. Productivity has skyrocketed, and you're right. If you do have the initiative that some people don't have, maybe it's more obvious that people don't have initiative. But with the number of podcasts out there, vloggers, with the number of social media networks that are available to people, I'd say there's lots of initiative. It's just that it's like my hometown. Everybody's a musician. How do you support every single person who's grabbing from the same pot of pie?
Mm-hmm.
Pot of gold, pot of money, pot of whatever. The same pot. They're all taken from the pot stick.
Well, it being Canada, I wouldn't be surprised that there's so much marijuana available.
Well, now there is, although I don't know. I mean, my family's not into that. I mean, we didn't. We typically drank, but even that's been on the out. So it's we were not a drug consuming family at all.
Sure.
So, but initiative, I don't know. What about like in China? And because you've been teaching online, the next generation. Now you're referring, when you're saying that they don't have initiative, you're talking about the people out there. But what about the students that you've dealt with that you're teaching online around the world? And what are you seeing them, and how are they responding to the current life that is post-pandemic?
Okay, so then a little bit of background. For a year and a half now, I've been teaching students in a foundation program. That means that they're going to study their major studies in English, but first they need to build their English proficiency. And so I've been doing that for Chinese University online now for a year and a half, and this will be my last semester because they are moving completely face-to-face. Back in November, I also started teaching Italian high school students, and ranging in age from about 12 to about 19. And some of them are C1 level, and so advanced level. And so, right, they are fairly sophisticated in what they say and think. And then also, I have had 3 different groups of about 10 or 15 Vietnamese students over topical classes, young adults and university students. Young adults, I should be clear, professionals, young professionals.
Okay.
And so very different societies and different places in terms of economic development. And so the Vietnamese, again, Vietnam's a great place, remarkably vibrant, has continued to stay that way since I was first there in 2010. If things were different in terms of my political outlook in terms of what's going on, I'd be comfortable living in Vietnam. Okay, they have challenges to be certain, but they don't go full authoritarian. Their government is fairly practical. Communist, no. Authoritarian, yeah, but not communist. And
what's the difference?
What's the difference? Well, for example, they understand that people like to make money, and that if you let them make money and you tax them at a reasonable rate, not too high, they have incentive to do better. And they will make other people's lives better, which puts less demand on you to try to provide everything under the sky. Right? That's good logic.
Right. So Italy, what was you're going to say something about Italy?
So with my Italian students, they are much more placid, and also Italy is like a lot of, well, seriously speaking, I mean, this was true even 15 or 20 years ago. People were saying facetiously, of course, that by 2100 there'd be no more Italians. The birth rate for the average woman only has 1.2, 1.1 children now. I think it's even under 1 now after the coronavirus. And if Italy
which is
doesn't
surprising. I think that's even in the West and the United States, that it's given that the coronavirus, people, they're locked home together, but then they do the math of like how much a child costs, and they're like, you know what? You sit over there, I'll stay over here, and we'll just watch our videos separately, honey.
And so the Italians are fairly sophisticated, right? Like I told you, some of them are up to C1 level, and they're 18, 19 years old. They're about to enter university, most of them. Yeah. Most of them. And certainly they are interested, they're happy, they're studying. Some of them are studying science. They're going to become information engineers or things like that, or robotics. And so I'm a little bit more helpful for them. Some of them are in what are really called classic high schools, and they study ancient Greek. They study Latin. They study the philosophy. And I'm thinking to myself, do I warn them about what happens if you go down this route? You wind up teaching English to Chinese kids. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's only if you speak English as a first language. I don't know what they're going to do.
I don't know. I mean, does China employ people? They prefer for their English teachers to come from Canada or the United States, but given the current sort of negative perception of being in the country, that might not be available to them. I have seen a lot more Africans, Nigerians, Zambians. So I don't know what China is doing in those two countries, but recruitment is up from there for sure. And so with Egypt, Egypt seems to be pulling in, China seems to be pulling in people from Egypt as well. We've had a few colleagues back in the day.
Yes, Omar.
He was on the podcast a couple of years ago, last year, 2 years ago, can't remember. So then that's China, Vietnam, Italy. What about China? You're mentioning them. So, are they at all hopeful?
I think somewhere in there there is some level of recognition that things are really, really bad, because a lot of my students are studying to be accountants or in finance. And
shocking.
It is super saturated. It's beyond super saturated.
Yeah.
And so at a level they understand it. And also at a level they understand that the Chinese government, among other things, is actively promoting artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is already taking away low-level accounting jobs, paralegal jobs in the West. So I can only imagine what is
lower errors
going to play out.
It's not going to be human error anymore. It's going to be one accountant who can't hire someone at a decent cost to be able to employ one automation specialist, one programmer to write a bunch of code that will then help him develop his practice or her practice far more. I think more. I've had this conversation with people here in China as well, where they're afraid of AI taking over. It's going to take. No, it's not. Yes, it will take away some low-level jobs, but do you miss the people who filed spreadsheets 60 years ago? Do those people miss their job? No. Do you bemoan the fact that the designer for the postage stamp has less work now because not as many people are sending posted envelopes? No, you probably didn't even think of them. Not only that, it's probably Canva. The postage stamp people probably, I apologize if they get offended by this, but Canva probably generates, there is something to be said about good art, like the painting behind you, but it's those jobs where life has gotten easier.
So to be certain, again, when I have this kind of conversation, typically I run the argument about how, by argument, I mean the logic, the thought out basis of, for example, you look at horse carriages. Okay.
I haven't seen one in a very long time.
Right, exactly. The point being that up until about 1910, 1920, almost everybody, certainly in the United States, were going by foot, bicycle, or carriage. Right. But you started losing jobs. You lost a lot of jobs. People taking care of the horses, people putting shoes on the horses, people building the carriages, repairing the wheels, cleaning the excrement or feces, right? All sorts of jobs. But there was very slow adaptation. And so a lot of people were able to move out of it and find other jobs. And also, in terms of when you go back 100 years ago, learning a new skill or learning a new job wasn't as challenging as it is now. Okay, you've basically, between AI and between robots and automation, you've gotten rid of most basic level work. And now you're taking away jobs that are done by the university educator. Now, I'm not going to argue university education for most fields is necessary or useful at all. I'm not going there. But very few things are left. And so it requires people to go back into a mentality more like maybe even during the medieval times. If you weren't farmers, then that means you had special craftsmen who can make furniture, as an example, or cobblers, your shoes, tailors, things like this.
Or join the army.
We may see a renaissance in such craftsmanship jobs. But again, it's only going to be the best unless you're content maybe with what your neighbor has got. And you don't want to go to the other side of your city to get a nice chair.
So to counter this argument that it was easier before, that's assuming someone understood what was happening. Because today we have the same sort of like, is AI actually AI or is it not? Like 100 years ago, did people actually believe that horses were going to stop being the mode of transportation, given that they were everywhere and they employed so many people?
But even if you didn't, and you wake up tomorrow and your job is gone, you could probably go into another place requiring manual labor and you'd still be fine. You can't do that now because most people don't do manual labor jobs. Manual labor jobs teaches, first you have the physical stamina, but also probably the mental stamina to have to deal with things on your feet for 8, 10, 12 hours a day. And
I think
white-collar jobs generally don't take that kind of mental discipline.
I would argue that even with that, going back to the whole idea that the young people, the young ones, and not even just the young people, but people today, there are more opportunities. They have more technology available to them. They can learn for free. I mean, I remember getting after you for saying just Google it. My response now is just YouTube it. That you can, if you committed yourself to watching a bunch of YouTube videos posted by a bunch of different people around the world, you can develop the skills necessary to transition jobs without getting certified. You don't need to be certified in anything. You can just do it.
So you'll like this story then. There was a guy either in Cambodia or in Thailand, Burma, one of the countries in Southeast Asia. Guy wanted to build a plane. Didn't know how.
Difference in countries now, don't you think?
No, but he doesn't speak English, right? He doesn't speak English. What does he do? He watches videos in English But all he does is
caption.
watch, and I don't think so, because this was like 10 years ago. But nevertheless, what he does is he watches a video and he actually successfully build his own flying craft. Now, obviously, he was the only one who flew in it, and yes, it didn't crash. He survived. He was fine. And so I agree with you. There is that kind of level of dedication that if you're so focused. But again, a lot of this is actually genetic. It's no good telling somebody, oh, just go to the gym. Okay.
No, I would disagree. I would say even if it's genetics, okay, let's put it this way. If it's genetics, then your genetics would sort of also contribute to you being able to think that you could go to the gym. So you can't just say it's genetics of bodily, because your brain is part of your body. And if you train your mind, yes, sure. But if you're saying that you can't just tell someone to go to the gym because of their genetics, I'm saying you could tell anyone to go to the gym. And if they have the genetics, the programming to think about, yes, hey, I actually could, I'll figure it out. That's where you're going to see people do things that seem impossible.
So, for example, you have heard of the God gene.
Who hasn't?
Okay, but all right, there are specific genes that program you mentally, and it is almost impossible to break. And so, for example, the class of people who like doing physical exercise and going to the gym, that's already encoded in their DNA. And you find high correlation between these people and the go-getters, if you will, the CEOs of the world, and so on. There are very few people who can be so manically focused.
Manically, yeah.
On it.
You mean alpha males?
No.
Are you talking about the alpha beta separation?
I don't care for that, God.
Well, how can you not care for the alpha males when you're going to say that it's genetically coded into you?
No. In terms of trying to determine personality and using, a masculine man does this, and screw you. Okay, I don't have time for this.
Genetics.
What?
Wouldn't that be genetics?
That the expression of that.
Why not?
Genetic? Okay. Well, genetics is more likely to determine that you become a narcissist or that you have high IQ or any of this. Yes, it is. It is.
I am very much of the position, quite opposite of what you're saying right now, saying that if you believe
it's debunked.
And it has to be, because I just finished reading this book called Power of Habit. And in it, they talk about, this guy is a Charles Duhigg that talks about how habits can be broken. They are difficult to break. It's not easy. And not only that, if you do break the habit, that old habit still sits there and it can always be re-triggered. But the whole issue with developing new habits and better habits is that you have to find out that loop, the cue, the routine, and the reward. And that routine is the hardest part to change, because you have to find something. You yourself have to decide what it is the routine should be, and what because the reward and the cue are sort of the same thing all the time. I like this, and then that's my happiness afterwards. But what you do in between that is the difficult part to change. And you're saying that genetics prevents you from doing that.
Yes, exactly. What you are describing, there are people who have that kind of genetic flexibility that is ingrained in their DNA also. I mean, for example, you take how we look at citizenship and nationality in the West, all right, in the Western Hemisphere. All right.
Bit of a jump.
No, it isn't.
Bit of a jump.
No, it isn't. No. So here, right, in the United States, in Canada, in Brazil, what makes you that nationality? It ain't blood.
Your passport.
It ain't how you look. But the premise is that you agree with the political philosophy of that country.
No,
whereas
passport issuance, that people don't care. I gotta say, do you think most people in the United States care about? I'm
talking about political theory and how citizenship is understood to be.
You're an example of how someone from a country can literally say, I don't like any of you politicians, yet you still have a passport from the country.
Are you going to let me finish? I said the political basis or theory. Okay, there's a big difference between agreeing with how the government functions and the political philosophy or theory. In the old world, it's blood. Okay, strictly speaking, the old world, your nationality is decided by blood. And so your government becomes authoritarian. Hey, but these are my people, right? So I'm going to stay here. And that is the super majority of these countries, right? Mm-hmm. People forget Korea or Taiwan, for example, were functional dictatorships into the 1980s. All right, there wasn't much difference in terms of the freedom, the social freedom in Taiwan.
We have changed substantially in the last 100 years. I mean, you're right, because 100 years ago, it was harder to move around. I mean, they didn't have the same passport system, but, the roads were still sort of blocked. But, you didn't move very far from where you were born or from the farm, basically. So now we are zipping around, all thanks to Mr. Wright, who didn't have YouTube to teach him to build an airplane. We're moving all over the place.
But where I'm going with this is that the immigrants who were coming to the United States or Canada, all right, like my ancestors from Ireland, as an example, one came. All the other brothers and sisters stayed in Ireland or in Greece or wherever. All right, it wasn't the whole family. No, it was the black sheep. Probably a little difference in genetics also, right? You're going to be similar to your brothers and sisters, but there are genes that make people more predisposed to being adventurous, to taking risk. Mm-hmm. And it didn't matter if you were Ukrainian or Kazakh or Spanish.
So in terms of that,
more opportunity, you wanted more freedom, you got on a boat or an airplane.
With that idea of being an immigrant, because this is actually the immigrant theory, that when you arrive somewhere, like immigrants, and I think the United States is having this word battle in the media right now about how immigrants they work so much harder, they're willing to put up with so much more. It's because what they would go back to is so much worse than what they would face here, sort of thing. But that's sort of the negative side of looking at it. The positive way of looking at it is, like, if you move somewhere else and you have that inclination to go seek something better than what you have available to you wherever you are from, I mean, genetics or not, does that help someone actually do more and better work? What have you seen?
You're talking about immigrants?
Immigrants to other places in the broadest spectrum possible.
So first, from my own political point of view, if a country is truly anarcho-capitalist, right, no social welfare system, then there ought to be the free movement of goods and of labor. If people want to
that doesn't really exist.
And so that's why you will find people who are self-identified as libertarian in the United States having a really large argument about to what extent immigration should be controlled by the national government in the United States, right? This is one of the few dividing issues, like abortion. And from my point of view, if we were to reduce the social welfare state and what is being promised to them, I think a lot of this would go away. And I am unsure to what extent this manufactured. Now, to be certain, like I saw 3 or 4 different cardiologists during my time in the United States.
Lucky
one was
you,
American. I prefer not to have the heart problems.
Yeah, I agree.
One was American.
Where were the other 3 from?
Egypt, India, and I think one was from East Asia. It's been a while. And so
the next logical question is, who was the best?
I'm still alive, so I guess I can congratulate all 3 of them.
What about the 4th? So who was the 4th?
I saw an Italian cardiologist in Vietnam, and then I saw 1 or 2 cardiologists in China who were Chinese. But no surprise there. And I'm still alive, right? So, yay.
But in general, would you say, so in terms of, because you were saying that people, like the youngins, don't have initiative, would you encourage someone these days to move to a different country? Maybe not do exactly what you've done, where the hardcore bouncing around, but take a chance, go to China. Take a chance, go to Taiwan, go to India, Dubai.
But they cannot be nonchalant about it. They have to understand they have to understand the political and economic situation of the country where they are going. And they also have to understand the situation for their neighbors and who they are politically and economically connected to. I know this sounds like a lot.
That's too much.
But there is, see, the thing is that 2 days before World War I, nobody knows World War I is coming. Okay, see, therein lies the problem. They
didn't know the Ukrainian war was going to start, even though there was intimations for months before that. Where would you encourage young people to go to then? I mean, given that what you're seeing and what you just said about how you have to do this checklist of vetting, where should the young peeps go?
All right. Well, so if you're from a certain set of countries, I think the United States excluded, actually. If you are tolerant of more socialist-leaning Western countries, Australia or New Zealand. New Zealand would be very nice. If you're young enough, you can get work visas for 6 months or a year. Like I said, the cost of living there is higher. It's a little bit more expensive to fly there, but if things go ugly, New Zealand is far from anybody. Nobody's going to be wasting the time or energy to touch New Zealand.
Ouch.
Australia.
Sorry to my New Zealand listeners, but they also make money there, though. The minimum wage in Australia and New Zealand is also higher than it would be in places like the States and Canada.
But you also have much higher tax rates and cost of living. Okay, yes, I know, I'm fully aware of what you're talking about. But in terms of your take-home pay, you're getting overall, you're getting less. Okay, great. You can say, oh, look, I got 60,000 Australian dollars, whereas I only got 40,000 United States. Well, first you need to factor in the purchasing power. And then how much is your actual take home? Slow down a little bit. Okay,
and tickets are expensive. If you mean to fly to the States, Canada, it's expensive to go. Although if Bali, Singapore, daily flights and very cheap-ish.
Now, if you're looking for other places if you're fairly self-starting and you are willing to take risk, then you're off to Guyana or Suriname. Now, yes, you may have heard recently. It's right next to Guyana and next to Venezuela.
Like Latin America?
Yeah, north of Brazil. Yeah. You know those three areas? You got Suriname, Guyana, and French Guiana.
And what are they going to do there?
What are they going to do? They're going to get rich. So
doing what?
Selling,
teaching
providing
English
services. No, well, maybe. But for example, Steve, which group of people got the most money out of the California gold rush?
The people who got the gold.
No.
It had to be.
The people who supplied the people who are looking for gold.
Oh, you're talking about your shovel argument that you love. I want to build the shovel to support the mining.
Hey, because in the end, you don't care who does the mining. All right, you don't care who's successful. You know somebody's going to be, and they're going to need equipment.
So what's the equipment in Venezuela or in Guyana that people need?
Venezuela is the big question mark here. So what it is that in Guyana and Suriname, if you look at their zones in the water offshore that they control, the amount of confirmed oil there rivals Venezuela. And so the Venezuelan, I guess you might not have heard about this, at the end of last year, Venezuela had a vote. And something like 95% of the people voted to invade this part of Suriname, which is along their border. Now, this goes back to a long dispute many years ago between the Spanish and the British. But
you just said that people should move there. It doesn't sound like it's safe.
I said if they're willing to take a little bit of risk. Logistically,
Venezuela get blown up on an oil rig?
May I finish? May I finish? Several things here. First, the jungle there is so thick. There's actually, currently, there's no way for the Venezuelan government to actually do anything. They'd have to go through Brazil. And the Brazilian army, the Brazilians have moved their portions of their army to that area to make sure the Venezuelans don't get any bad ideas. The United States has sent an aircraft carrier group to the Caribbean, not too far away. But
Denny,
so if you look,
I'm kind of getting the impression that if someone were to ask you where they should go to work, they might get a longer explanation than they sort of anticipated. Make sure you have something to drink and a pee bag just in case.
But also, very curiously speaking, like what I am typically researching. All right, if you want, right?
Yes. What are you looking for? Like, so when you're doing this research,
I'm looking for places where it's easy for foreigners to own land for farming. It doesn't mean I'm going to farm and sell my goods. I want a homestead. And a lot of places don't have different requirements for different specifications for who can own what. In a lot of countries, foreigners can't own farmland because they're worried about you cutting off food from their people. Okay, fair enough, right? Fair enough.
Wow, so Canadian farmers would say that's not fair enough. I paid for the land, it's mine. But why do you have the right to say what I do with the food? Okay, well, I see what you mean.
No. These restrictions are on foreigners. If you are an actual citizen,
I see. Okay, yeah.
Then again, it'll vary from country to country. I can't talk to that. Next, the length of time or the difficulty in getting a temporary residency and then permanent residency and then citizenship. What is the minimum income amounts if that's the way you're going to go? How much do you need to invest to start a business, or how much money do you need to buy a property to meet these kind of requirements? And almost all of the countries that have decent enough deals are in the Western Hemisphere. I mean, for example, if you are consistently earning $1,500 to $2,000 American dollars a month, all right, online with whatever means, Mexico, Panama, El Salvador, Colombia, Peru, Chile, Argentina, and Uruguay all have programs for you, and probably more. Okay, these are the ones that I'm aware of, and I've looked maybe a little bit into, or at least I've heard of. And then after that, you want to.
When someone's asked you this question, and you give them these 7 countries or 6 or 7 countries, what would they be doing there that if they have a university education, because these are the people who are like, okay, I'm thinking there's no opportunities here, they want to go out somewhere. What would they do in these countries that would sort of provide a better opportunity than what they could find in their homelands?
So this is already supposing that they have online income, right? Those minimums I mentioned to you.
That's a bit of a jump. Where are they getting this online income from?
Well, what skills they already have. In terms of just showing up.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, hi. The connection, go figure, the connection got a little buggy there.
But we weren't talking about everyone's most favorite country.
No, we weren't. That's a new one.
So in terms of things like that, I know, for example, Paraguay, and Paraguay wasn't in the list that I had mentioned. Instead, you just have to put a certain amount into the bank account, which might be more feasible for you. But otherwise, showing up to a country without a job is it's not impossible. I mean, what you could do, as an example, is you go to, say, Argentina or Uruguay. These two I'm spending a lot of time focusing on. And that is where I will be this summer. By the end of August, beginning of September, I'm going to be in one of those 2 countries. For example, you could go there for 90 days. And at the end of those 90 days, no visa required. If you're American, from one of the Western countries and a few others, you can say, okay, I've assembled this work online, all right, that you're a remote worker. If you're trying to find work inside the country and get a proper work visa, you may have to go back to your home country. Now, Uruguay Uruguay is a country with fewer people than Georgia, fewer than 4 million people. The lifestyle is Western. Cost of living is unfortunately maybe 60%, 70% of what it is in America. So not cheap at all.
So wait a minute. If people have this online income, why would they move to Paraguay, Uruguay, Argentina? Why are they going there if they have this money coming in?
Well, so first, you are going to want to have a second citizenship. You want alternative choices and at least a residency permit. For example, when the rest of the world is going crazy for the first 10, 12 months of the coronavirus, Australians couldn't go home. Okay, as an Australian citizen, you could not go home even. And I'm sure, now I don't believe in the UN, but I'm sure the UN says, as a citizen of a country, they have a treaty that says you can go home. And I'm sure Australia is a signatory of it, but you couldn't go home. And so
now, okay. All right. I just do a lot of people, I'm kind of getting the sense that from the United States, is this a real concern that more people want a second passport from somewhere else so that they can do whatever? Yes, especially after the coronavirus. Now, the United States, as you know, it's a federal republic, and so different states handle the coronavirus differently, no matter what the national government may have had to say on the matter. And a lot of states went full authoritarian on it. You know, they were stuck. You could find videos from April or May of 2020 where cops are going onto the beach to arrest somebody who's swimming in the Pacific Ocean. Nuts! And this would
somebody on the beach.
This would encourage someone to get a second passport.
Yeah, when your government is going to go, again, I don't use this kind of language, but when your government decides to go full authoritarian and you see the warning signs, you want to get out. That's probably a good idea. Also, okay, realistically speaking, we may be, right? Maybe in
realistically, maybe it's not real then.
No,
it's hypothetical.
No, you didn't let me finish. You'll understand. At the beginnings, or maybe perhaps even in the middle of World War III. For example, right? People think, when they think of World War III, they think of 1939, right? They think of September 1st, 1939. However,
World War III or World War II?
World War II, excuse me. Well, I'm saying World War III may have already begun.
Okay.
All right. I'm using World War II as an analogy. World War II, people think September 1st, 1939, if they're European. If they're American, they think December 7th, 1941. If you ask the Chinese and the Japanese, they might say 1937. They might even say 1931. Okay? And
this is what Putin's point was in the Carlson interview, was that where did these hostilities begin? And he was going, if it's 2022, then it could be 2014. If it wasn't 2014, then it was 2008 or 2004 with the Orange Revolution in Ukraine. He's like, this is nothing new. This has been going on for decades, as he basically said in the interview.
And so, look, what happens typically during wars? Countries typically become mercantile. They shut down their borders. They focus on consumption and production within their own country. There is rationing. Life becomes ugly. And if you're of a certain demographic, you may be compelled to either fight or do some kind of labor. And if you decide to not, in some countries, they shoot you. And in other countries, they imprison you.
Brings up a good point or question I want to ask you in terms of your travels. Given all this and your knowledge about this, like, have you ever felt threatened or at all sort of in danger of either being recruited to go to an army because you're a male and you look like you could fight, given you're sort of like you're able to move, or like the fact that you're in these different countries, have people looked at you any more oddly than they normally would in terms of like, hey, foreigner, hey, American, like, what are you doing here? You're a spy or anything like that sort of impression?
So to be frank, I never got that feeling even when I was in China. I don't think I ever told you this story. During the first National Day holiday, I was in China. I'd only been in China a month and a half, so it's early October of 2004. Me and a British woman who was from the Caribbean. She and I are just wandering around, and we wind up going into an airplane production plant outside of Harbin.
Okay.
All right. We wander onto the property, and then we find this huge fence with barbed wire, and we're on the wrong side of it. And I point out, well, if we follow the fence, eventually we'll find an exit. And we found an exit. And so there are these befuddled guards who are looking at me and looking at her. And they don't know what to do, because obviously we've wandered onto maybe not a secretive compound, but it's probably, government protected for a reason, because they produce airplane parts. And even then, after about 5 minutes of confusion, they just waved us away because we both looked relatively incompetent. And so,
how was their English? Did they have any idea what was going on? They're like, foreigners, we don't want to deal with this.
There was probably a level of that, but also they just concluded that we weren't spies, right? That we weren't doing industrial sabotage or espionage, right? So we got lucky to that extent. And they knew, I don't know. See, I don't remember very much. What I do
So what about in the recent times, like the last 2 or 3 years? I mean, 2004, there was no major threat of a war breaking out, other than the Iraq war or post 9/11. But in the last 3 years, we've had a lot more saber taking out rather than rattling.
I think on that point, it's not so much an issue in China because, frankly speaking, I will just speak again about numbers. There are very few foreigners, relatively speaking, in China, and it's very easy for them to do cursory checks on all of us. Use Google, right? They can Google people or go to LinkedIn.
Do you think they do background checks based on Google? Like they're like, oh yeah, look at this guy, he's funny. Let him in. Honestly speaking, I think that will go into calculation for some of their applications. Yeah, they do checks, of course. But I believe employers and government people do use Google to check who you are. And if you show up on whatever social media account, they just kind of want to know who you are. That's it. I mean,
and I
don't know how far they go with that.
See, they have more than enough people to do it. See, people complain about the inverse, right? Where they say, oh, the FBI is treating all Chinese as spies or something like that. Well, no, first they don't. Okay, they don't have the resources to do it. But also, so
does this scare you? Has this scared you? Has this made you afraid when you're walking through China, through Georgia, through Egypt, through Kenya? Have you ever felt like you're going to get enlisted to fight a war that you don't believe in?
Oh, good heavens, no. No. But I'm not a local, right? The Egyptians have no need for a blue-eyed white guy. Now, certainly there are some Egyptians.
What about in terms of imprisonment? Have you ever felt threatened to be thrown in jail for like the fact that you're there?
Well, as I'm one of the chosen people, if you may remember, if people knew that in Egypt, I would probably have some difficulty right now, especially with what's going on, mind you.
Did you?
Nobody knows. I'm not going around wearing a yarmulke or a Star of David. If I were to, I imagine I'd have some challenges.
But only in Egypt, nowhere else.
Well, after what happened in October, I'm not so sure.
Going back to Egypt.
I don't anywhere in the world. See, for the most part, in my opinion, right?
You've traveled quite a bit, so this is sort of what I'm trying to understand here. Given your travels, if you haven't felt threatened, other than the last couple months since you went to Egypt,
but it's only if I were to talk frankly about my beliefs, about my religious beliefs. But no, it is. And for the most part, the anti-Semitism that Jews typically complain about in the West, a poop swastika, where someone, get over it, okay, look. But since October, and I mean before what you have with the Israelis basically leveling Gaza, all right, and that's wrong, okay? And a lot of what the Israeli government does is wrong, and almost everything that they have done since October 7th has been completely wrong. completely mismanaged. And Netanyahu is an evil, truly evil man. But the things that I see now on Facebook, the things I saw on Twitter, even just 1 week afterwards, before the Israelis had even moved, the number of people who were flying Hamas flags, not Palestine flags, okay? Big difference. Supporting the Palestinian people, big difference between them and Hamas, was dedicated to the destruction of all Jews. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's hard to negotiate with somebody who in the end wants the removal of your whole people. That's a little bit more challenging.
And after Egypt, so like you're going to go there for a week and you're going to sit in this sort of very dangerous area, apparently, which, I mean, I never imagined that Egypt would be dangerous.
If I were to show that I am a Jew, now Egypt is a little interesting because the Egyptians, while they are genetically cousins, to the Jews or the Arabs, they aren't Arabs. And Egypt has a long history of a Jewish population. And in fact, the last Jews didn't leave until after the 7-Day War. And so I've done some
Jews all
about
over the place, though. I mean, saying
and
that they have a long
truly,
history in Egypt. I mean, they have positions everywhere, populations everywhere, people everywhere.
But just as, for example, the Iranians or the Persians take pride in the fact that they are Persian and not Arab, the Egyptians are the same. And the Egyptians take pride in the fact that there used to be, well, not a significant portion of their population, certainly not from the Egyptian point of view. Egypt has 100 million people. But from the Jewish point of view, there used to be tens of thousands of Jews, and they did freely practice. Okay? And up until Israel declared independence, there were still quite a few Jews there. And even after 48, when Israel was declared, there are a lot of Jews who are anti-Zionist. And I am one of them. Zionism is a political ideology. It is not a religious thought. And a lot of the Zionists are atheists.
You did mention that if you spoke what you believe and made yourself appear, like say that you declare that yourself a Jew, you could also believe that you are human and like to live, and therefore, as a result, that will be your truth that you speak. I speak truth that I want to live, therefore I shall not say those other words that would therefore truthfully have someone other incited against me. You could do that. Or am I wrong in thinking this?
No. I'm not. Just because I don't tell you something doesn't mean I'm being unfaithful to who I am. Okay, right?
Good to know. Good to know.
And so I don't mention the fact that I am Jewish unless it's pertinent to the conversation. Okay, I don't just say, "Hey, I'm your local neighborhood Jew." I don't do that.
I'm not so sure about that. I think you actually did when we first met. I'm pretty sure there is the statement that you were a Jew.
Well, no. So, what happened, Steve, was one of those days that we were getting training for our former employer in China.
Your former employer.
How we need to show cultural sensitivity, but also we should put places on a higher standard. And I said, no, you don't lecture the Saudis for the fact that they don't like Jews and don't let Israelis go in. You don't lecture them about that. You don't win friends as a Westerner telling other people how to live.
I think it goes along the lines of different people have different ways of living, and you're not supposed to impose just because like how things are done in the West doesn't mean that should be foisted upon even your students. Like example, Halloween or Christmas. Halloween would probably be a little bit better an example because it's most people would say secular and pagan, but because religious has much more. Christmas has much more of a religious connotation to it. But in terms of celebrating Halloween, just because you're from the West and you celebrate Halloween doesn't mean that you should bring this into your classroom. That's the idea. I mean, that it should be. Is it okay? You ask the administration, who is representing or on the sort of the face of the organization to the culture that you're in, and saying, "Hey, if I do this Halloween themed class, is this okay, or is it culturally taboo?" I mean, if I start talking about the devil eating little children, is that Halloween, or is it Batman and Catwoman as dress up? Is that Halloween? Tomato on this one. I think that's where the whole idea of making sure you're not pushing you're telling people how to be and stuff like that.
And so, like, when I'm all right, I may have come up to you and said that I'm the minority hire. I'm the Jew of insert company name. I'm doing it a little bit tongue in cheek, right?
I hope so.
Typically when people think of minority hires, they don't think, especially in a Western context, they don't think of a guy with brown hair, blue eyes, and white skin.
I also don't think you could even pass as a minority because you had the qualifications. It wasn't so much that it was minority. I think, as China has proven, it's difficult to get people in the door, then find qualified people to come in the door, and then once they're in the door, to do a job as they are supposed to do, sort of thing. People have come over to countries. I've seen it happen as well in the ESL industry, where they land and they're like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? And within a month, they're gone because they're just like, I can't do this. This is too much. So it's not unheard of to have that sort of culture shock hit you pretty hard. So going forward, you have mentioned several places. Your advice to young people is to move after doing extensive research, which if they ask me, I'd say, yes, go. Pick a country, go. Find a job. Don't have an online repository of gold or whatever that you're selling calls on. Just go. Be safe, but go. Looking forward, where do you see? You have something to say. I know I'm being a little bit facetious here, but what are you upping about?
Again, it really depends what your purpose is. If you really are concerned about where the world is going,
if they're like,
because you might be,
if they're like, I listened to this podcast where this old guy was like, the young people have no initiative. I want to show initiative. I'm going to go somewhere. Where would the first place that they should go?
All right. If I'm wrong about what's going on or what will develop economically, politically, Vietnam is still a great place for economic opportunity. East Africa could be. There is the potential in Kenya and Tanzania if you're willing to take the time and figure it out. They've invested a lot in education. They are focused on, they already realize that they cannot go into being the factory of the world. Maybe the factory of Africa, perhaps. They're looking for economic union among several of the countries, and there's a lot of government initiatives trying to get people to do business. And
Vietnam,
foreigners are welcome.
East Africa.
East Africa.
Yep.
And like I said, a lot of the Central and South American countries, if you know Spanish, and even if you don't, relatively high level of living, standard of living for most of them. Not too far away from home if you're American or Canadian. And they are fairly Western. They are certainly more Roman Catholic. So you need to be prepared for more religiosity if you're not so accustomed to that.
Right, yes.
Even Brazil. Now, Brazil is a little bit more, can have some more domestic challenges. I don't mean with the government, but in terms of violence and corruption. With Argentina, so there were 19 different ministries when Milei started as president. 1 month later, there's only 11. And so the socialists and the commies are on the streets complaining about the authoritarian Milei who is making the government smaller. So Argentina is a little bit of a basket case right now.
Well, given that, especially from the States, I'm assuming, or at least my understanding is that a lot of people do actually have some knowledge of Spanish. It's probably more widespread than any other language other than English.
Yeah. Oh, Spanish, definitely.
Aside from Canada, but I mean, like English, they're going to know Spanish a lot more than that would be their second language, basically. If even they would have a token understanding of what it is. So it sounds like South America, Latin America, that's the place that you would sort of say that would be probably the easiest to get to and just set up shop to find a job.
Yes. Well, maybe not to find a job. Again, things are a little touchy in Argentina, but it seems from an ANCAP point of view, evolving the right way. Chile is having some struggles with their own peso. Uruguay is very interesting. If you got a family, there are tax benefits to that, bringing in kids. If you're married, you can get citizenship faster than if you're single. They are aware of what's going on in other countries that are suffering from fewer and fewer people, and so they are slowly making it easier. So I'm looking at Uruguay and Argentina specifically. Uruguay, if you've got nothing, Uruguay may almost be impossible. I'm not sure about that.
What about Europe? You wouldn't say anyone should go. You said New Zealand, Australia, you said Vietnam, East Africa, and now South America. Europe is not on the place to go. So
again, if you think that this thing between NATO and Russia will go away, you're delusional, in my opinion. But if you believe it and you're right, then there's a lot of opportunity in the Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, but also in the Balkans. Serbia, Kosovo. Okay, they're small. They're not necessarily recognized by all of the EU, by all of the UN countries for whatever reasons. But land there is very cheap. Government regulation is very little. Now, obviously, you probably don't speak a Russian-based language if you're in the Baltics. I'm not so sure, within the Balkans, there's a lot of different languages, and I can't speak to that at all. And so to some extent, that would be a little bit challenging.
And what about China? So you've done a lot of travels and you lived in China for such a long time. If someone said, I'm going to China, or like, should I go to China? Is it a good idea to go to China? What would you say to them at this point, given that you've been out for so long as well?
So I still am subscribed to like 4 or 5 different channels on YouTube that follow Chinese news. And the numbers I'm seeing about the high rates of unemployment, the number of businesses that left, the complete failures of foreign company expos put on by Shanghai or Shenzhen, right? They're trying to get foreign companies to come and tell about their, and just a handful of companies show up. And so you got to really think, what are you hoping to do? Because a lot of Western companies, a lot of Westerners, there's been such a huge flight. Again, if you have reason that that's going to change, or if you see that changing, oh God, I can't think of his name now. Rogers, I can't think of his name now. The older investor Jim Rogers, right? Jim Rogers. He has a lot of faith in China. I disagree with him on this part. Usually, politically and economically, I agree with him. China, I almost.
He was also big on Russia too a couple of years ago, as far as I remember.
And Kazakhstan, and also Central Asia, and also East Africa. But on China, I think he's wrong.
And so, if someone said they're going to China, you're kind of saying that you wouldn't encourage them to go. You wouldn't say not to go, but you wouldn't encourage them either.
I think you have to first appreciate what your nationality is and what their relationship is with China. No, I'm going to be honest. Yeah. I think that, for example, China has developed contacts with the Middle East, and they are in a lot of the Middle Eastern countries, rather than using Western companies are now using Chinese companies to do their offshore drilling.
So if someone was trying to plot their way around the world almost as much as you have, would China not be a good place to go to establish that connection so that they could then get into places like East Africa or Middle East a little bit easier, given that they either tried to learn Chinese, they're ingratiated in the culture, or they're willing to work with the people overseas?
If they are Arab, if they're Persian, to some extent, if they are from Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, you have to be a little bit careful because there has been some backlash against China in Kenya and also in a lot of the Western African countries. Because
what have you seen?
There were not full on riots, but while I was in Kenya, they didn't sack Chinese buildings, but they were certainly protesting outside of them that too many Chinese goods were coming into the country, competing with Kenyan-made products, and a lot of Kenyans believe that was causing them to lose their jobs. I don't know. I can't talk about every single Kenyan who was out there, but there were quite a few unhappy.
Mm-hmm. Changing topics. In your travels, now we talked about buying food before, the eggs and water and everything. What has been something like unique that you've seen in all your travels? That we talked a lot about the politics and everything else, the impending doom of World War III catastrophe. But if someone wanted to go travel the world and they wanted to look around, what have you seen that's been actually kind of neat and that you couldn't see anywhere else?
All right, so Nairobi is the only capital in the world that has a national reserve park within the city itself, and so it's really strange. You're looking out in the savannah, right? Maybe through some binoculars that your guide gives you. You see some lions and elephants or giraffes in the foreground. You look up and you see the skyline with buildings that are 40 stories tall. I mean, it's a real juxtaposition. And then also, so I was in Giza, which is on the west side of the Nile River to Cairo. And it's really strange, right? You're on the highway going, and then all of a sudden, oh, those are the pyramids.
Okay.
Right? And it's the same thing when I went to see the pyramids and the Sphinx. And so you've got, obviously, you're on what? You're on the southwest side of the pyramids, and then you're looking towards Giza. And it's sort of the same deal. You look out and, oh my God, there's all those buildings. And when I was there, it also, something I saw at the entrance to the pyramids, there is a KFC, and not far from there, there's also a Starbucks. And then what it made me think of is how, you go to the Great Wall of China, and you can see also a Starbucks cafe. And what I thought of was capitalism has finally conquered the ancient world. Okay? We won. It's over. We got it.
Just capitalism, not America?
Okay, American capitalism has taken over. All right, we put our flags on the Great Wall of China. We put our flags right next to the pyramids. Malindi.
Malindi, what's this?
Malindi is a city in Kenya. There on the East Coast, right, very close again to the equator. The water is very nice, warm. First time I ever saw literally white powder sand beaches. I mean, you hear about it. I never really thought it was a thing. Yes, it's very soft, very nice to walk on. I lived in Malindi a couple of months. Malindi, if you're a historian, it's a very interesting place because Huang He, I think that was his name, right? In the 15th century, he is the guy who took the Chinese Navy all the way through the Indian Ocean along the African coast. 50 years later, Vasco da Gama, the Portuguese, comes around to the same place. These were part of trading routes that were used by the Arabs, and Malindi was one of those chief cities. And so you can see the Portuguese, and if you look around, apparently not all the Chinese got back onto the boats before it got back to China, before it went to China. Because you will see some of the people who claim, and actually it's fairly clear, they got Chinese blood, all right, because of the shapes of their eyelids or other things like that. And so it's a very interesting place from a historical point of view.
Mm-hmm. How long does it take to make a baby? I mean, a port stop, a layover, isn't that why it's called a layover?
No, but there are a couple of things here, right? The Chinese don't look like the native blacks or the Arab leaders. And so you need some time to integrate into the population and be accepted, or accepted enough not to be ostracized by the general community. Mm-hmm. So anyway.
So as a classicist or a wannabe classicist, potential classicist, seeing the Giza, the pyramids of Giza, how did that feel? Like when you see something that's been there, like you've read about it, you've heard about it. Have you been to Greece at all?
No, I've never, unless George is in Europe, I've never spent time in Europe.
Okay. So the point here, the connection here is that Greece has a bunch of old stuff, world-changing old stuff. Egypt, bunch of world-changing old stuff. What was it like?
So when my fiance and I went up to it, I said to her, I thought it'd be bigger. Now, fortunately, Arabs, they get sarcasm. Okay, they love sarcasm typically. All right, and so she appreciated the irony. Now lives in Giza. She can actually see it from her apartment, or there's some buildings in the way, so she just walks. But after 15, 20 years, it sort of loses its appeal, apparently. So she has no care for it.
My connection with that idea, though, is that when we used to travel, when we didn't work at home, I used to make it a point to go in front of Tiananmen Square or in front of the Forbidden City, because it's like, I live in Beijing. I'd like to go past this as much as I can. It's something that's talked about now. Now I don't do it because it's far away. Like it's a 40-minute bike ride from where I am. So I don't do it. But on the way home, I always used to try to go, and there and back. That's why I didn't like taking subways. But there's a certain mystique, I would say, to be able to live in those places that are talked about and that have these histories that go back for so long.
And I'd agree with you. She doesn't. She doesn't, but I do, for what it's worth. Anything else?
What about did you talk to anybody else from Egypt who might have had that same sort of wonder, or was it that very common? They're like, yeah, it's the pyramids. A bunch of people like to come and see them and leave their trash all over the place.
So, I've talked to some of our other Egyptian colleagues also, because we've had a few, and they were sort of like how Rasha was, but they were also they were from Cairo or even Giza. And so, okay, yeah, all right. I mean, for example, I have family who live in Staten Island, one of the boroughs in New York City. Never been to the Statue of Liberty, never been to Ellis Island, never been to the Museum of Modern Art. Yeah, it's there. We could go there whenever we want to. No.
And you hear about it. It's in the news, or a new thing like that. It's MoMA would be a little bit different, but yeah, Statue of Liberty, it's one of those things that you literally, I've always sort of had the idea that especially if you're a traveler or you're going to immigrate or move somewhere, that you should do as much of the tourist stuff within like the first couple of weeks as possible, because then after that, it will become part of the background noise, and it'll be something that you always intend to do, and you won't get around to it until like 3 weeks before your departure date. So if you ever move, if you do take that chance to go live and travel overseas, go do the touristy things, no matter what all the other, the crotchety old foreigners say. Go do them, take the pictures, post them to Instagram, and that way, check, you've at least done that part.
So, yes. So the reason that I actually got to the animal reserve in Nairobi fairly early on, about 2 months into my time in Kenya, what happened was the Chinese university, I had a day off. I wasn't really sure if I was going to go that day or wait for another day. Well, I was going to be having a conversation with Judy that weekend, and I mentioned to her that I was considering going, and she said, well, Denny, now you got to go and get me pictures.
Right.
And so that's really why I did it. And when I got ready to do it, it was raining that morning. And I was thinking, well, would this be a good day to actually go out to the reserve? And what they turned out, it was a good day, because lions go to the watering hole and they're going to hunt. And so they're not going to, so there were actually a lot of animals out. So It actually worked out really well. So
what would be the next, so given your proclivities towards living off the grid and everything, but you've now been to see the pyramids of Giza, what else, and you've lived in Beijing, what other sort of wonders of the world or highlights sort of would you like to see?
So I'm an eighth Greek, and I study this stuff.
You're claiming a lot of lineages. Okay.
I'm American. Look, this is normal. This is normal. All right. My great grandfather on my mother's father's side, he was from Greece. The rest of that side of the family were Irish. Okay, that is easy. That's the easy one. It's my father's side of the family. Yes,
do you want to be like living in Greece, or do you have extended family there that you could hold up for for a while?
So my aunt was actually in contact with family in Greece going until around the time of the Vietnam War. And then at that time, connection was lost. Probably what happened was the family who was doing it died, right? And that's it, right?
Okay.
The kids or the nephews and nieces didn't keep in contact with my aunt after that. And I mean, this was 10, 15 years before I was born.
Right. So Greece is on the bucket list, basically.
But I don't think it's going to happen, or it's not going to happen
visit
anytime
or
soon.
To visit
I'm
or
not,
not to live.
So unfortunately, I'm not close enoughly related to be able to get Greek citizenship. Greece in and of itself, also, Greece doesn't have very high requirements, actually, if you're looking to maybe find work there, okay, or try to get yourself into the system there. Greece is actually fairly liberal, relatively speaking, but that's because the Greek economy has been in the doldrums for 10 or 15 years.
I kind of wonder, have you ever thought of being like a flight attendant or work on a cruise ship? I mean, that would have you making money, free housing, basically, and you get to kind of jump around the world.
So I do not have the coronavirus vaccination. And so that basically eliminates airline jobs and cruise jobs. I had considered it before. In fact, one job I did apply for really early on in my career was
Wait a minute.
teaching
Do they
English.
still have those requirements that you have to be vaccinated?
Most airlines do. Now, there's
Now,
some pushback.
Are those American-based airlines, or could you work for another airline?
Because typically speaking, if you're going to be doing international routes, you can't come into the United States. All right.
Okay.
I mean, unless you're working, right? If you're listening to this podcast, I mean, for example, I know as an example, right? If you are really an airline attendant or you can fly airplanes, you should go to Kenya. There are lots of countries looking for people who can do it. And in fact,
but do they need to be vaccinated to go to Kenya to get a job in the airline industry?
No. If you're a pilot, okay, usually like Air Kenya, they're not going to be I guess there may be a few flights from Nairobi to New York.
Could you have worked
like
for Air Kenya then? Like, is that sort of a possibility that would be kind of neat? You could live out of Kenya, fly over Africa.
I'm going to be 41 in May. Look, while there might not be there is not age discrimination in America. Yeah, sure. Okay, whatever. Fine. I won't argue the point. In a lot of countries, they're quite upfront about it. You got to be a certain age.
So you're too old. Yeah.
And also,
no, I hear you because you mentioned this before with the Australian and the New Zealand visas. That working travel visa cutoff is 35. Same with France, 35.
Okay.
You're done after that. China also sort of has, and a lot of ESL industry countries like that need ESL teachers, cutoff is typically around 40. They will hire older people, of course, but they're typically looking for someone under the age of 40 to work at these places. So unless you have different qualifications and stuff like that, but if you're just a bachelor's and you're just trying to switch jobs and you want to go teach English, you're over 40, it would be a little bit more difficult for you to get a job these days in China. But so 35 and then 40, also that sort of cutoff. Then in terms of travel, you've taken the long, circuitous route of trying to live off the grid. Is living off the grid still on the docket, or has that changed at all?
No. And that's why where we started with the conversation might be also where we end our conversation. My profile, okay, the profile that Rasha or other women would have seen. I'm very clear about this. And Rasha agrees, certainly not with everything about my thoughts or feelings about where things are going economically or politically. But there's quite a bit that she does. And she understands why it's best to have land to be able to feed yourself. People who live in the old world, Africa, Asia, and to some extent Europe, and are not Western, they like the idea of having gold. They like having land and being able to farm. They get the necessity that bad things happen in their country's histories. And they see what happens to people who aren't adequately prepared. Mm-hmm. And no, she's all for it.
Right.
for the farm.
Now, before you mentioned though that in your consultation work with these young ones who are have an online income. Now, is that not the new sort of gold rush to have an online income to be able to work from anywhere? Is because you are doing this. This is sort of, I don't know if you appreciate how good you got it, that you are able to find such employment and work online from anywhere in the world. You are living the dream.
I do not argue that point at all. Okay, I don't disagree with that at all. But the reason I'm able to do it is because I put in the time. I put in the time researching and understanding the development of where my field was going. I got training in this field. I understood where it's going, what the limitations are. I'm really concerned about what is going on with AI and now I see people who are advocating for using AI to teach students how to write essays.
They should.
Just screw it. Just give it up then. Let's give up on essays being a way to assess. Fine. I'm all for it. And I'm worried about where everything is going. And that puts a little bit of time pressure on me, perhaps, to get my act together and get my farm going, but not so much because...
Okay. So with that, what has prevented you from doing it? And number two, how long would it take?
So what has prevented me from doing it? So you may remember last summer was when I thought I was going to be doing it. But then as it turns out, my son goes to study in America, and so I take him around. I need to take him back to Asia, and so that puts me in Korea for 3 months. By that point in time, I'm figuring out what I'm going to do next. I still, as you know, need to go to Malaysia for some medical tests, and I need to go to Singapore. All right. And so it makes no sense to go to South America when I'm still out here in East Asia. But then I'm doing the math, and I realize it'll make more sense to just come here to Georgia, where my brother's already staying. I know the cost of living is cheap, rent is cheap, no variables. Just work a few more months, then go to Malaysia, Singapore, get it taken care of, and then off to there. In the meantime, right. I get engaged. So, and so all of this is stacking on. All right.
So I guess when you said that you have to do this, or you had to stay in East Asia, like, is that because of the cost of living? Because you're making X amount and your expenses are Y amount, so it sort of makes more sense to stay in East Asia.
And so I mean, airplane tickets, certainly they were at real lows during the coronavirus. They bounced back by quite a bit.
Stupidly expensive.
Really
I've been looking, and I'm just going. I'm finding it hard to justify to go. What's a phone call? How about a phone call? But to speak in the defense of spending money on airline tickets, I've actually sadly been made aware of several people who passed away in the last 6 weeks, beginning of 2024, that I'm going, you know what, if you want to go somewhere, you want to see something, you want to go do something with your life, go do it. Because, we only get one life, and it's taken very, very early sometimes. So
is this a VC?
No. This is home. This is people that I know. So,
I'm sorry.
So it's very real that I've known people that I used to talk to. They're either that or people I know. They were part of their lives as well, and they're gone. So it's plane tickets. They're expensive. Travel, great and good, but you have to make sure that you are touching base every now and then as well.
Yeah.
So for you, how long until the grand plan is accomplished?
So grand plan, there's no perfect place or system, and trying to make sure I meet all the different requirements, whether it be Uruguay or Argentina, minimum income requirements, and how you demonstrate it, and what paperwork you need and what paperwork you don't need. One other thing I forgot to mention about why there's been delay, especially if it's going to be Uruguay, is I need to show anywhere where I've spent 6 months or more, I need to have police reports about. And so, look, I didn't leave China until January of 2020. Now, I've researched getting police reports. It can be a little bit tricky, and it's a lot harder if you're outside of China. Now, because of how I have lived, interestingly enough, by the time this comes about, there's only one country where I've spent 6 months or more together in one place, and that's Georgia. Kenya is only 5 months. America, yeah, maybe altogether it's been 7 months over the 4 years. And so, and so actually in terms of paperwork, it makes my life really easy. And all I need to do is just show them my passport and they can see where I've been. So they know I'm not lying. And, you know, they want to take my fingerprints, do Interpol, FBI. Yeah, they can do whatever they want. All right. So I'm not worried about that. But that was a contributing factor. So with Argentina, I just recently learned that if you put $6,000 into starting a business and they approve of your business plan, they'll give you a temporary work permit. And that to me sounds a lot easier than showing $1,200 or $1,500 American dollar minimum income a month.
Yeah,
or in Uruguay, where it's $1,500 as a single. And remember, when I was doing my planning, it was as a single. Married, it's $2,000. And so I'm going to be speaking with Uruguayan lawyers about what happens if they grant it to me. And then, you know, just 2 or 3 weeks later, I happen to get married. How well do they receive that kind of thing? Are they going to be saying, well, okay, you got 3 or 6 months to get the higher threshold, or are they going to say, nah, you're trying to game the system and screw you, you're out? Right? So that's why I'm not sure right now. And also being there on the ground, I can see what the land is like. I found a decent enough, good enough land, farmland, not very far out of Montevideo, the capital of Uruguay. And it's only $700 or $800 an acre. So you can go onto websites and see different grades of agricultural land in Uruguay as an example. Some are more designed for cattle and sheep, because apparently Uruguay is a big exporter of beef along with Argentina. Apparently it's fairly famous for them. There's some for vineyards, because Uruguay apparently also has a lot of good wine, but there's also just normal vegetable, fruit farming, and then orchard farming. And so you can go to different places that tell you what zones to check out and how much they cost. And so for me, I'm looking at maybe $700 or $800 an acre.
Would you go into wine vineyarding, whatever it is? What is it? Viticulture?
I am, as you know, I am a teetotaler, and my fiance, for religious reasons, doesn't drink at all.
Don't drink at all. Well, good.
And so I don't.
There has been a pushback, actually. I've noticed that in the United States that alcohol seems to be on the way out. There is the rise of other drugs, but alcohol seems to be getting sort of pushed out, and more non-alcohol beverages are being served, which might be, you know, the shovel to the next gold rush. Just saying.
What, producing fentanyl? Yes, there's a lot of people in northern Mexico who are bringing fentanyl.
Yeah, if you want to take the negative route, or you could go to positive route and go non-alcoholic beer, non-alcoholic wine, non-alcoholic spirits. It seems to be a huge issue. Yes, if you got away from what the media is telling you about the fentanyl and the heroin epidemic that's in the States, but you could certainly look into other means of making a buck, such as that business idea that you need for $6,000 or whatever it is, or and then in Argentina, although what would the Argentinians say about the not? What do you mean you want to make our grapes non-alcohol? How dare you, foreigner, Americans?
Well, you may remember you and I had talked about this so many years ago.
Blueberry vodka.
Blueberry, and blueberries.
I think it's still a good idea. The only issue is the logistics of making it work. It was just something that because I don't really promote the idea of drinking, and for myself, like I really want to pull back a lot more on consuming alcohol, because mostly for productivity reasons. I know a lot of people talk about the health benefits and detriments of alcohol intake, and you could go back and forth. My problem with that is that, you know, we're both historians of a matter. The Greeks, you know, how many ideas did they come up with? And they were hammered pretty much all the time. The Romans, they had vomitoriums. And then, like, the Renaissance, I mean, people were swigging beer for breakfast because it was safer than water. So, you know, for people who sort of criticize the alcohol intake as being horrible and our paleo bodies, I'm going, we did a lot of cool shit with alcohol intake. Coffee and alcohol has basically driven invention for the last, I don't know, ever.
500 years?
But
More.
I
Yes,
mean,
yes.
that's a simplistic way of looking at it. I know a lot of people would sort of disagree. I know there's a lot of people pointing out research that it's very detrimental to the body. My question, however, about alcohol intake is the net negative or net positive. So if you are learning a language, it increases your brain power. If you do exercise, it increases your brain power. But if you drink, it takes down your brain power. How do you find an equilibrium? That's the big challenge.
And I mean, the human body naturally produces alcohol. And also, yeah, it does. Okay, yeah, it does. Wine, it is clear. Wine, limited amounts of wine does help the health of the heart. All right. Now, this is something I've researched a lot about. I understand it. It may be disputed, but look, you can say that 1 + 1 makes 3, and I say 1 + 1 makes 2, and you can say, okay, well, Denny, it's disputed. Yeah, all right, it's disputed. That doesn't mean there's a basis to it.
So in terms of alcohol having a benefit on the heart or on the body?
Specifically.
Sure. Now, which study was it? Because a lot of those studies are now being reconsidered given the cultural influence of what they were, because as people have pointed out, a lot of when people drink, it's usually in social circumstances. And so it's not so much the alcohol, it's what alcohol is bringing them together to do, being social with people.
So just like how, for example, blueberries are shown to help blood pressure and other things dealing with the heart because of phenols. All right, it's because of a very specific chemical inside the blueberries. All right, it's the same thing with the wine. There are specific things within the wine itself. Again, I'm a disinterested person. It's not going to help me. Okay, I'm not. I don't sell alcohol. I don't sell wine. I'm not drinking the stuff.
All right, so
I don't want to go anywhere.
If Argentina is the place to go, what would the business idea be? I mean, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm going to consult the lawyers and see which types of applications are the most likely to get approved and see if I can meet that. Because look, if I just need to put it in and attempt, right? It's not that my business needs to succeed. And it doesn't, right? And I open up a bank account, I have my invoices and profits and losses and everything like that. But I already have my savings and I can continue teaching online, right? And so even if I'm at a loss for it could be a shell company, more legitimately, right? I imagine the lawyers are going to say, yeah, we can't help you lie about it. That's what I anticipate. To what extent can I try to meet whatever the demands are? Does that mean I need to learn a new vocation? I need to learn a new skill, or alternatively hire people, right? If it's a business, right? As a business owner, as the manager, you don't do everything. Actually, there's very little you do depending on what kind of business it is. Fine, I hire people. All right.
Who would you hire? Who would the first person you hire?
Well, if Javier Milei is somehow forced out of being the president of Argentina and he's looking for a job, he's an economist. He's got a PhD in economics.
So what would he do for you?
He would troll. He would. Okay. You should listen to him.
Troll. Dude, I can troll you better than he can.
No.
Pay me, I'll troll you.
No, not troll me. He and I agree on most things. Have you seen any of the clips of what he is saying about how he talks about? No, I haven't seen any of this. I don't even think I knew. Well, I've heard his name before once. Oh, yeah.
Right, so he's your first employee, and you want him to go troll people for you.
Oh God, the entertainment, the stuff he says.
Issue.
Wow.
Now I'm sure my listeners are also people who are listening here are probably have also clued into this. You're going to hire someone to troll other people, yet you're going to go live off grid. WTF? Whose account is he going to use?
No, that's reasonable. Look, I trust the guy's going to do it. Okay, and it doesn't mean I can't get reports. Now, more seriously speaking, again, we've talked about this before. I think that there is opportunity, as long as it continues, to develop people's skills, non-native speakers of English, doing work, doing business projects or simulating business projects with people from other
What's
countries.
your business in
No,
Argentina?
that's the business. That would be the business. I'm telling you, is putting it on a school online doing this. Argentina was going to join the BRICS. Malay stopped that. But Argentina is still fairly influential. And as long as the socialists don't execute the guy, right? As long as they don't get their way, Argentina, I think, is well positioned to make a comeback. Because whereas the Northern Hemisphere is going to war and putting war trade on one another, Argentina is doing trade with everybody.
Sure. So you're going to be working online using Argentina as the base. Basically, that's what you're looking
for. So what I expect would be, my pitch, as it were, to the Argentinian government for why they should accept my application. I'm looking to make my school have Argentinian students, but working with Vietnamese students or students from East Africa or Japanese, wherever, Egypt, right? Rasha told me, Denny, you should find work in Egypt. Well, I think there's political and other problems in Egypt, so I'm not staying there. But there's a lot of up-and-coming countries, and they are going to be using English, for better or for worse. While BRICS, India is a country in there. And even if they're not going to do business or de-emphasize doing business with America, English, Spanish, so get the Spanish speakers in Argentina speaking English. Or maybe or setting up a school that also teaches Spanish.
As an ESL professional then, with a school potential, and we've talked about AI a little bit, where do you see the ESL industry and the viability of being an educator, a language educator in the modern world? Is it a good idea, or are there some other skills we need to be developing?
I think that what I'm going to be offering is different, because I think ESL as such, already people can develop vocabulary, can develop reading skills without teachers. All right, honestly speaking, it is so saturated, the internet. And listening, there are ways that you can do it. In terms of things like speaking, I mean, there's still an element of needing feedback, even if your pronunciation is fairly accurate. Which vocabulary do you use? In what context? What is the proper register for this conversation, right? You're talking to somebody who's older than you, younger than you, and so on. And so my knowledge and background in different societies and my tolerance and understanding of how differently people may communicate and not be offended, and also know what to expect so I can warn people.
Warn them, I might say something that offends you, but
because of how language is used, how this person's going to be acting or speaking in English because of what they are accustomed to from their native land.
Right.
This is the added. I think AI, again, as I said, I now see how there are videos and on LinkedIn, teacher students, how to use ChatGPT when writing essays.
Yeah, they should.
Then don't waste your time assigning essays. Okay, just throw it in. Give it up. Don't require writing.
What do you think will... So given that students are able to do this, what is demanded of teachers to get around this whole idea that doing homework is now easier than it ever was before?
So it's challenging. You have to have students present in class. And the problem is they need to have confidence. They need to have the ability to do it. Confidence more than anything, but they need to have the ability, and you need to structure it in such a way that you need to determine what the purpose is. What the purpose is. If it's for them to learn something and then present it in the class, that's one thing. But if you want them to be sure that it's original, then they have to do it in the moment. There's no real choice anymore. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you couldn't use the internet. It was a lot harder to cheat. So you knew that the person had to be original to some extent, or almost always. Now,
so is it going to be more face-to-face then, is what you're saying, instead of relying, so the language education, the language sort of development process is going to be dependent and more focused on in-person productive skills rather than online writing skills?
I don't know if they'll necessarily be face-to-face. I still think, for example, for pronunciation accuracy, nothing beats face-to-face, period.
Right. And face-to-face, I mean, like whether it's online or actually in a classroom.
Right. But I will still continue that idea. Teaching vocabulary or other things like that, to the extent that customers are wanting that service, I don't see a real distinct advantage face-to-face over online. And in terms of marking and of grades and things like that, universities, I mean, whether it's online or face-to-face, it doesn't really matter anymore for the most part.
Right.
Now, it's certain, well, I need a caveat that going back to the mid-90s, San Jose State University was the first university in the world to try to do a long-term study on the use of doing online classes. And they did college algebra, right? Very basic low-level course. And what they found was clearly, year after year after year, if you don't have the initiative, learning online is fruitless. And so there are people who do need a physical space. That will always be true. Now, whether schools or communities or businesses are willing to pay for that, or just say, suck it up and learn online, that's unclear.
You've dropped this word again, initiative. How does someone develop initiative?
Again, for most people, either you really legitimately have it or you don't. Now, you see things like hacks, which might, so we have in science class, in chemistry, you learn about something called a catalyst. The reason you use a catalyst is so that it requires less energy for the final result, right? It's a shortcut to making the reaction happen. And so, like you were suggesting earlier, how you've made ways for you to develop your business because you have found, like I said, hacks. You've found things to take away elements that you don't like, meaning that you have to dedicate less energy to it. So, if you don't have the initiative, but you have the understanding and the foresight to understand where you can find tools to make it so that your jump in energy required to do it becomes less, there you go. That's what you should be focusing on.
Should this be taught, like in schools, like in part of your ESL instruction? Does this sort of come up at all? So not so much like how to become a superhuman, but is it just the language content, or is it now like life content?
This is life content. Now, see, this is entrepreneurial content. All right. A long time ago, when a lot of people were busy, if they owned land or had their own business, people understood this. All right. You have to think about what you can do to make your day-to-day life easier so that you can, if you want to dedicate more time to making your business better, or alternatively to God, right? You want to go to church or to your family or whatever. We've forgotten that. Most people, if it may be latent in our DNA, maybe not, to work, to have some foresight and to be able to focus and create without receiving orders or instructions from others. But again, with the development of technology, yes, I'm now ready for the aisles in China. With the development of technology, that's a lot more challenging. Again, to master different areas, there's so many people now, and it takes more time. But if you have these basics where you are able to recognize opportunity, understand or perceive things a little bit differently.
Would you say AI in general, well, it's not real AI anyway, but like these large language models, are they a good thing or are they a fad?
Well, those aren't necessarily
they're not the same thing. Right.
Yeah, they're not.
Is it here to stay? Has it changed very much? And is this a good thing, or is it something that we're going to play around with for a couple years and then it's going to go on the wayside?
Well, I don't know how far it will go. Have you ever read the book Dune?
No, I've seen the movie. Fell asleep during it twice.
So one of the key aspects of Dune is there's this world that is some 8,000 years in the humans, 8,000 years into the future, and never actually encountered aliens, started expanding into the universe, into the galaxy. Well, what you learn early on is there's something called the Butlerian Jihad. And the Butlerian Jihad occurred because what happened was of artificial intelligence, it reached a point where it was a threat to humanity. And we waged a war, very similar, if you will, to the Terminator.
Okay, so these are two fantasy
but the point, well, no,
situations. Okay.
Not really. The point was that artificial intelligence, if truly given freedom, right, and that's the only way it's going to really function, it will start understanding and grasping things so quickly. And if it recognizes humans as being a threat, we'll remove it. And so what winds up happening in the Dune world is basically there are no computers. All right, very limited computers and technology. And so
how has
do everything.
AI or like, do you use ChatGPT at all?
No, because I don't want to give them among other things, I don't want to register a phone number. Screw it.
Okay. Do you use any of these sort of like, because you could use a ChatGPT online for free. I mean, you could type that into your favorite.
But usually, no. But you need to register with most of the ones that are actually of value. The ones that actually have.
There's proxies you can use. There's proxies. Yeah, you can find online proxies to access ChatGPT 3.5 or 4, both. I mean, you don't get the same convenience of having a history of your conversations, but if you're not looking for that, then it doesn't matter. Are there any AI tools that you're using these days? Like anything like that?
Nothing. No,
but you're teaching online. Wow,
yes.
Dude.
No, my work is very simple. Okay, my work is very, very simple. And what the knowledge I have is all that I need. And in terms of teaching critical thinking skills or debate skills or business skills, what do I need ChatGPT
Well, if I may, sir, I don't think all the knowledge you have is all that you need. I think you are aware that, like the sophists, Socrates and Plato's and Aristotle's and the philosophers of before, what I know today is not going to be equal to what I will know tomorrow because I will keep on learning. Although they never said that. That just sounds very good. I mean, you do keep on learning. You do keep on reading. So going forward again, but looking ahead, next couple of months, next couple of years, what are you looking for to learn? What books are you looking to read? Because you're going to end up at Uruguay at some point. You're going to be off the grid possibly with the former prime minister trolling people for you. What are you looking forward to in the next short term, 6 months, and then longer term, maybe 3-4 years out?
So even before I had left Korea back in November, I had already started. I inherited a Kindle from my mother. And so I had PDFs about farming. And so I started reading them when I would go to the local Chinese restaurant and get egg, noodles, and tomato fried. I go there twice a week and I'd be reading. And then after I got to Georgia, I've been watching tons of videos. I must be subscribed to maybe 10 different channels now about different things, different aspects about farming. And thinking about it. There are just so many different techniques, so many things to think about, and all of them are feasible. But there's a reason why people study and get a bachelor's or a master's or even a PhD in agricultural sciences. It is serious. A lot of people don't think farming is serious work. Oh, good heavens, no.
It's become a lot more complicated, but mostly not just because of cultivation, but because of financing as well. It's a huge business, and it's gotten, although it's neat to see, it's not like how it used to be, where if you grew up on the farm, it was sort of assumed that you were going to work on the farm. Nowadays, to work on the farm, you need to basically go to school to learn how to be the next generation of a farmer, rather than keep on doing what you are, like what the farm did to get you where you are.
Entrepreneurial skills, management skills, biology and chemistry. If you're going into it, animal husbandry and maybe animal anatomy, if you have to take care, right? You can't always take your cow or your chicken to the vet, perhaps. Maybe you have to figure out something. I mean, it can be a lot of different things. And I already knew that. Okay, I knew that. Yeah.
Would you milk cows in Argentina for $25 an hour or 25 pesos an hour?
$25, yes. 25 pesos, no.
Wow. Well, so what if, okay, so it's not $25 an hour. That's in Alberta. Or actually in Canada, you could get $25 an hour to go milk cows.
Seriously? Look, okay, everybody who's listening to the stream, if you can go to Alberta, all right, if you can go to Alberta and milk cows, do it. Get some experience with animal husbandry. That will be worth it. One of the
answer of a lifetime right there.
Farmland around the world is grossly undervalued.
Milking cows by hand and farmland do not go hand in hand.
No. But this gets you into it, okay? I have a little bit, not zero, but just a little bit of experience actually farming. I've got a lot of theoretical knowledge, a little bit of practical. Working and living on a farm, if you can find a way to do it, 6 months, a year, when you get into it, you'll have such a great understanding. If you do it right,
and if someone has made it this far in the conversation, as someone who has worked on farms before, I can say that if you have the initiative and you want to go work on the farm, the best thing you can do is show up. You show up and you're willing to have a go, you'll get paid. They'll take care of you. They'll feed you, they'll house you, they'll pay you. All you got to do is show up on time. I mean, even actually you could even wishy-washy some late sometimes if you have a good reason for it, like because you were milking the cows early or something like that. But show up and be willing to have a go. Farmers, I know farmers in Canada and Australia who would hire you right now. If you sent me a message, said, hey, Steve, hook me up, send me to these farms. Yes. I mean, they need people. AI and online and whatever off-grid stuff doesn't milk cows. It doesn't drive tractors. It's not there. They still need people there.
And that's also another reason, depending on how these play out and what I wind up doing with the gold and the silver, how things play out. That is what I would do in Argentina, right? I got this business that is only doing $1,000 a month in revenue. And I'm out with one of these organizations. There's many organizations, if you look online, that set you up to volunteer service or do work on farms and live there. If I had that opportunity, I would do that. I don't think I'm going to, but that's
volunteering is a little bit different than working on a farm, though. That's,
no, obviously working is better, obviously, but you have to take what you can get too. But if you are able to get a paying job and it's decent enough, look, you're worried about not being connected. Starlink, right? All hail Elon Musk. Starlink is available over most of Canada, and it's what, $150 a month? I don't know.
What about Argentina?
It's different from place to place. Argentina and Uruguay, because I looked this up. In Argentina, it will be available second quarter this year. Uruguay, third quarter this year. Because
how much?
What I imagine, no prices yet. They haven't set it up yet, or they're still finishing it. Now, what I imagine realistically is going to happen is, if it's Uruguay, I'm going to need a couple of months probably to determine which land to buy, probably without any houses on it or anything like that. It's going to take a little while to develop. And so I'm going to be living in Montevideo with my...
learning farming skills in the city.
Well,
okay.
No, unfortunately here, I need to be earning $2,500 a month, right? I need to meet that minimum requirement. But what I'll be doing is during the weekend, figuring something out. Once something livable is built on our property, then I'll probably still be working online, at least for a while. Again, I never really intended the farming to be a business as much as just self-sustaining. Mm-hmm. But now, being a stepfather and a couple of other things, I'm going to have to wait a little while.
I guess you're not the uninitiated and the non-initiative people. You are very much a self-initiating people. I mean, all the things that you said and the mileage that you've put on to all the runways around the world, certainly people can, if they don't totally agree with what you're saying, they have to give you respect because you have been flying and doing a lot of stuff. I mean, you're working the dream online, you're traveling, you're researching second passports in other third world countries and second world, other countries basically. So kudos to you for figuring this stuff out and being able to go through with it as well. Any last final thoughts before we let it go? I mean, we've covered a lot today. We've caught up quite a bit. I can't believe it's been 3 years since we last recorded, but we have talked in the meantime since then. So any final thoughts that people should be aware of, and sort of what any hopes and dreams that you got going on?
Well, if you stick with things, you can be successful like Steve here. Look at that microphone, right? I didn't even, right? It's the first time I actually looked down, right? I've been looking at you in the face, or maybe a little bit high. That's a big mother microphone. What is that thing?
A microphone, or are you talking about the beard?
No, the beard you've had a while. The microphone, this huge thing I see right in front of you. Yeah, that thing. What is that? I've watched a lot of podcasts. I've never seen something that big.
Well, because I don't normally show the entire. This is a Zoom H4n that I've had since 2014. I bought it back in Canada, and only in the last year did I drop it, and that has started the unfortunate ball rolling of it slowly disintegrating. So it basically has made 10 years. This is February 2024 is the 10th year that I've had this thing. Phenomenal piece of work. I use it for all my recordings basically. Only recently have I bought a DJI microphones. They're about like an inch big. Mm-hmm. Great microphones as well. But the reason why you see the full microphone today is because I'm also using a new camera to shoot instead of my typical cell phone. So it's showing a bigger picture, which I don't like because it's showing widescreen. I actually want it to be a little bit shorter, but I couldn't get that to work given the this program, this new platform that I'm using as well. So there's a lot of new things going on right now that contributed to seeing the whole microphone. But there you go.
One thing that didn't contribute that you do need to pay attention. Everybody needs to. CBDCs, central bank digital currencies.
Oh, but it's so much more convenient to use Alipay and WeChat than any other paper currency.
But these aren't CBDCs. Okay, they aren't. All right, there are ways of transferring money. Okay, there is a big difference there. More and more governments are setting up systems to use CBDCs. Now, Trump has said, if elected, he will not allow the United States. So that means great. That takes you to 2028, 2029. But if the United States goes along with it, watch for other governments to do that. The significance is this. As was already demonstrated in the first pilot done by China. What did the Chinese government do? They gave people money, right, just to test it out for free. Great. However, the longer that you took to spend it, the less you had. So not only with inflation in general do prices go up, but they were actually decreasing the amount in your account. But not only this, with CBDCs, it will be programmed to follow what you buy. And so, for example, let's say that you like your meat. And so by meat, I mean beef, pork, chicken, that kind of meat. Anyway, you are reaching intolerable limits set by bureaucrats. Then they just won't allow you to buy it. They will track and see everything that you buy, everything that you do.
All right. So people will keep that in mind as well. I did have this one last question on this. I had two questions, but I was going to kind of skip over them because we've talked about so much. Question number one is Trump or Biden 2024 or someone else? Who could it be? And then the last question I would say is, are you missing China at all, given the fact that you've been up? But I think I ask you this every single time, so it's become a little bit of a worn question.
So certainly I was accustomed and used to being in China, and of course my son lives there. And I have many of my very good friends are Chinese. And would I like to go back there? Would I like to see it again? I guess so. But unfortunately, that's not in the cards.
Not at the time, not at the moment.
Frankly, I'm dubious I will ever be there the way things are going. As for the 2024 election, so, it just gets crazier and crazier and crazier. Last week, Biden was accused of having government documents improperly stored at his home in Delaware. Now, this is what they went after Trump for in Florida a couple of years ago, right? The FBI raided his home, made a big deal about it. Now, Trump was actually the president when he had those documents, and so he can unclassify anything he wants. The documents that Biden had were from when he was a senator and when he was vice president. He didn't have the authority to do it. So what happened was there was a special investigator in the FBI to research this. And seriously, this is what they said last week. They cannot prosecute Biden because he is not mentally competent enough to help defend himself in trial.
Which then begs the question, wait a minute, are you saying...
If he cannot defend himself at trial, how on earth can he be president of the United States?
So then if it's not Biden, can it be Trump? Or are you thinking that someone else is going to come out of the shadows?
Oh, this is nuts. I mean...
That doesn't answer the question.
No, it's really unclear. Pick your conspiracy theory at this point.
Which one are you following?
I'm not in America, so I don't have to worry about this kind of thing. Right, because the Democrats, what happened was the Democratic primaries, there aren't any. There are no Democratic primaries. And so we have never had in American history where the front runner for a political party for the president of the United States died before the election.
All right. Well, that hasn't happened yet.
But also to add to the complication, we have the 25th Amendment in the United States, where if the vice president and the majority of the cabinet decide that the president is incapable acting as president, they can remove him.
They can
or her. And so Kamala Harris, the Democrats have to figure out what they're going to do because they have lost. They have lost the moderates. Okay, they have lost them. Trump will only get more of the black vote. Trump might actually get almost half of the Hispanic vote. It is getting really.
Sounds like you're calling for a.
No. Trump is a threat to the system. They could assassinate him. Okay. And what gets crazier is there have been so many lawsuits against him, which are frivolous. Almost all of them are frivolous. There's a real possibility he could be in jail when he's elected. Now, just a few days ago, if you were paying attention to Pakistan, they just had elections and they elected their new president, a former president who is in jail, Amir Khan. So, last year.
So what happens in Pakistan can happen in the United States? Is like that sort of the insinuation?
So what happened was last year sometime, I don't remember exactly when, there was a mugshot of Trump. He actually had to go get arraigned in the whole bit. His mugshot hits Twitter, and it is the most entertaining thing. His popularity only helped by getting him arrested.
So you are saying that Trump is going to win, basically, because you're saying that everything's stacked in his favor.
No.
And if he's in jail, he's going to win the minority that is in prison.
He's not stacked. So certainly not. See, the shenanigans that went on in the 2020 election to fortify the election. Go to Newsweek, January 2021. They talk about, and they use this language, a cabal. A group of people set up a system to help assure that Trump did not win the election. All right. So they admitted it. They were so arrogant about what they pulled off. They had no problem putting it in Newsweek. So you can go find that article even today. Maybe in 2 or 3 years, it'll disappear from the internet. So if you're on the internet and it's 2024, go take a look. But they admitted it. And so shenanigans going on again, how Trump is here, Biden is here, and then all of a sudden they stop voting. And then the next morning it goes up a little. And then all of a sudden, All of a sudden, Biden is up here and Trump is down here. You go,
All right.
how did that happen?
Well, sounds like you're, despite you wanting to be off grid, you are certainly on the grid with the political spectrum. I mean, you certainly love this stuff. This seems to occupy a large amount of your attention.
You need to be able. You need to make sacrifices, and you need to understand the politics of the world if you're going to be able to successfully navigate it. I'm paraphrasing an ancient Greek philosopher. I don't remember who it was. But they said, if you don't pay attention to the politics, you will forever be a victim of it.
Sounds like it was like Thucydides or someone. I'm not sure.
And that's why I want to get on the farm. I want to get away from sight so I don't have to worry.
But then what are you going to read if you're off grid and there's nothing about U.S. politics going through your news feed all the time?
I am going to enjoy the peace and calm.
Why don't you just do that now?
No, I don't.
Well, I know. Why don't you just do that now? Enjoy the peace and quiet and turn off all the noise.
There is no. Because if I do that, I'm not going to know if the tanks are rolling from Russia to Turkey, as an example. Or, Azerbaijan just expelled a whole bunch of Armenians from the last enclave of Armenian people within Azerbaijan. And so maybe they get a boner and want to kill more Armenians. And they might roll through Georgia, too. So, no, I'm not in a situation yet where I can just get off the grid.
And tanks will stop rolling when you're in Argentina? This is how it's going to work?
I will be somewhere where I don't care if the tanks are rolling through Georgia. Georgia's a great place. The people are nice. But what I have learned from my studies in history is while revolutions and warfare can be exciting, and as Jim Rogers and others will point out that immediately after conflict, when there's blood on the street, is the best time to invest in a country. I don't like to play that game. And what I have learned from my history studies is a lot of people don't do too well. And the further you can be from revolution in a place that doesn't need revolution, I'm not talking, if it's an authoritarian, that's a different matter, okay? But if you've got some degree of freedom, get away from there where there's going to be war. I'm practical on this point.
Timeline of the next World War? When does it finish?
Like I said, it may...
I threw it in there. When does it finish?
But see, this is the thing, is that it could take decades. It's really hard to tell. Because one thing I will say is I don't think the fighting that's coming, that will be here, Western countries, China, they are not going to rely on the draft for fighting. Now, maybe for production, okay, building infrastructure, maybe. I can see that. But already we can see, for example, how the Houthis are using drones to effectively handle the American Navy.
All right. This is, I got to say, this sounds like more fear warmongering than anything else. I've heard this before, the future of war, future of AI. This is more like, be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. I kind of wonder why, if people are going to look at this stuff, why don't they just shut it off and go live the peace and sereneness that they are looking for? Be at peace now rather than, filling their heads with this media.
Because I am Eastern and not Western like you, sir. I understand that sacrifice may be needed in the present. I have discipline of mind to not look to 6 months or a year, but to understand what might need to be done 5, 10, or 20 years from now. Now, my one caveat to this is that as a Jew, I'm reminded of Moses. Moses took 40 years, think about that, 40 years to go from Egypt to Israel, which is really remarkable considering the fact that they border one another, right? There is that. But when he finally got to the promised land, God was not very nice to him. He died.
It took 40 years.
No.
So is the moral of the story, then hurry up.
40 years. No, the moral of the story is God lets Jews achieve their dreams, but it's only after 40 years in the desert. But he died on the hill watching the sunset on the promised land. He never actually got there.
And so what I'm worried about, the ultimate dream Denny, are you
No,
telling
it
me
isn't.
that?
But I've only been at this 20 years.
So you have
And
another
I'm
20
hoping
years.
it doesn't take me another 20 years to get there. That is what I am hoping.
This is our third time. So basically, if we do an average of one podcast per year, that's another two. Basically, it's going to become the Steve and Denny podcast. It's going to be, where in the world is Denny going right now? I mean, well, then until next time.
Yeah, until next time.
I mean, you've got a lot set up for you. You didn't really give a definite answer for the Biden-Trump debacle, but it sounds like you know who's going to win, or you think you know who's going to win.
I think, right, it's because it's so unclear. It's really unclear what the Democrats are going to do. I don't think Kamala can win. So she may wind up becoming president if something happens to Biden, whether an assassination, which I don't think, but medical reason, or his death. She becomes president, but she will not be on the ticket for election afterwards.
Right.
Trump,
well,
they may elect him. All right, he's got the nomination. That's very clear. If he were to die, then it becomes really unclear what the Republican Party does.
If any of them died, that would cause major problems for about a day or so in the markets.
It's bigger than that. Trump is going to be like the Grim Reaper because he is. He understands those memes of him going to Nancy Pelosi's door, Chuck Schumer's door. That is going to happen because yesterday or 2 days ago, the paperwork that showed that the Obama administration spied upon the Trump campaign to become president. There's no question anymore. There's no question. And the Russia narrative.
It sounds like this stuff occupies your mind. I don't know why you don't read more Greek philosophy. Would that help? Would that even help? I mean, purge this American media stream.
What are you talking about?
I think you need to go back to your roots there, Danny. Latin and Greek classics. Read the philosophies. Read the Stoicisms. Aurelius, if you have to. I mean, I still haven't really read much of it, to tell you the truth, but I don't know.
I read Meditations to my 2-month-old son years and years ago.
Okay,
all of it.
All right, Denny, it's been fun. I'll tell you. Actually, I'll give you one last sort of shot here. If someone were to read a book, what is the next book that they should read? That would what would you recommend someone to read at this time?
Tao Te Ching.
Tao Te Ching. In Chinese or
in
translation? Okay.
Oh, definitely in translation, or at least if you can read modern Chinese, that's fine. Traditional Chinese, I shouldn't say traditional, but I mean classical. Classical Chinese.
Classical Chinese, yeah.
It is, you're not from that time, you don't understand the references, and so much is lost. So, modern Chinese, or better yet, English.
Wow. All right. So, third time's the charm. Well, I mean, always a charm to talk to you, Denny. Always interested to hear where you are in the world and what you're getting up to. You have been trotting around the world, flying around the world. You're on your way to potentially Uruguay or Argentina, getting married next week, possibly, or sometime soon.
Not next week, but Egypt.
This year in Egypt or wherever else. And wow. And all of that being said, read Lao Tzu. Tao Te Ching, the road, I guess it is it the way of life, the way of the Tao?
Yes, the way of the Tao, exactly.
All right, Danny, thank you very much for the time. We'll probably do this again. We'll see where you are next time.
Yes.
All right, have a good one. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.
All right, there you go. Episode number 44 with Denny Goin. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it. All the show notes and the track will be available up on my website, stevensersky.com. And of course, you can stream this on all the major outlets, Spotify, Apple, Google, and of course, YouTube as well. Thank you very much for taking the time. I appreciate it. We'll do this again. Have a good one. Bye-bye.